Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 32 of Podcast vs. Enemies, a Destiny Massive Breakdown show. Get some snacks, a hot drink or cool beverage, and get comfortable as we have a much anticipated episode for you this week as we return to the Dreadnought. This week we will cover the reprised Kingsfall raid from Destiny 1, where we'll be giving advice on weapon and class recommendations on the encounters, break down the eccentric Kingsfall weapons and its distinctive origin trait, and also give our thoughts on its return and changes implemented since its last appearance. Saint and Impetus are, of course, joining me. Hope you guys are doing well. Let's kick things off with some thank yous from the community. Impetus.
Yeah, we don't have any specific thank yous to give this week, so we're just going to keep it nice and broad and say thank you for all of your various ways that you support this show. And want to also give you a reminder that you can send us all kinds of feedback directly to any of our socials or via the Destiny Massive Breakdowns Discord server. We greatly appreciate your positive, your critical, and your constructive feedback, as that all helps with the trajectory of the podcast and how we present and break down builds, activities, and much more in the PvE sandbox, which is what we're doing in today's episode. So please do not hesitate to reach out if you've got questions or ideas for builds, anything that we discuss, why we think they're good. We are all happy to talk Destiny with you. And just as a reminder for our reviews specifically, we use Chartable to aggregate all the podcast reviews, and that will sometimes take extra time to get reviews from our non-US listeners to show up. So if you would like to be thanked a little bit closer to when you send in the review, just copy and paste that review and send it to our socials so that we can give you a quick and proper thank you. And of course, we also want to extend a special thank you and appreciation to everyone that supports the show through downloading, listening, discussing, and supporting us via Patreon. I'm going to pass you over to Saint for the show outline.
We are going to cover just a couple quick highlights from the TWAB and an update that came out this past week to the game, and then it's full-on Kingsfall special. We are talking about the encounters. We'll kind of give some quick breakdowns of the encounters. We will review all of the weapons, and then we'll cap things off with our thoughts and opinions on the raid, how it came back, its loot pool, all of that stuff. Before we get into that, we're just going to hit a couple of quick housekeeping items. First up is heavy-handed. This is something that has historically had not great functionality in a lot of different ways, but now it has been fixed, and a lot more powered melees are now working with heavy-handed. As a reminder, this mod is a 7-point arc charged with light mod, and the primary effect of this is that when you are charged with light and you expend your charged melee, you get 50% of that melee back, and it consumes a stack of charged with light. There is also an effect where if you are surrounded and you get a kill with a fusion rifle or a shotgun, sidearm SMG, it can generate ammo for you, special ammo for you. But that is kind of like the other mods where you need a secondary arc mod on that piece or on another piece in order for that to take effect. Just some quick highlights here. The Tempest Strike and Stasis Howl of the Storm are the only exceptions. But other than that, it should be pretty much functioning as you would suspect. This has really been blowing up with like Consecration this week. I feel like I've been seeing a ton of stuff with that. Also with like Ballistic Slam and Lightning Surge and some other stuff like that. But just kind of open up some builds there, which is always good to see. On the PvE, the show side of things, massive breakdowns and all of that, we have a new build section. Again, this is going out in the new form threads format, which honestly I really like. Court has already been in there posting some of his hunter stuff as Impetus and I are working on our respective classes as our kind of hunter, warlock, and titan vanguards respectively here. Kit Ketcha is also in the process of kind of keeping all of that and getting all of it into a centered location on the Massive Breakdowns website. We're hoping to get this rolled out at some point in October. We will kind of be populating this over the next few weeks or so. We'll talk about that in just a second. But also, if you're looking for, just a specific question about a build that you're putting together or something like that, as always, feel free to just shoot us a message. Very happy to talk about mods and all that jazz. Court, what have you been up in? What have you been up to in Destiny this past week?
Well, 3 more Kingsfall runs, which is very apt for this episode, and still no touch of malice. It certainly escapes me. I did say last episode I got the collective obligations, so this will be the new exotic, which will remain unacquired for a few runs, but I'm enjoying Kingsfall. We will talk about our thoughts much later on in the episode. Other than that, I've been testing out some builds, as you were saying there, Saint. Primarily been focusing on Arc and Void, which I've now, of course, shared on the Massive Breakdowns Discord server. By the time this episode goes up, all of my builds should be up. There is one. It's related to Gerfalcon Soberk, which is the exotic for Hunter, which is currently disabled due to various bugs. So hopefully see that very shortly. But it's fast becoming one of my favorite go-to general class builds, so I've been having a lot of fun with that. And of course, reminder, you can find all of our builds on the Massive Breakdowns website in the future. Impetus, what have you been up to?
Yep, did a few more Kingsfall runs. Did a quick trip to the lighthouse to help some people guild their flawless title. It was the sidearm this past weekend, so not particularly thrilled with that, but at least I have it unlocked in my collections. Also been in the process of refining some old builds for their new home on the forums, and then of course the Massive Breakdowns website in the future. So I'm going to be putting that stuff up shortly. And then on the seasonal side, I did unlock No Reprieve and Blood Feud for crafting, so I've been leveling those up, playing around with those, been having a good time. Saint, how about yourself? What have you been up to?
Yeah, no touch of malice for me either, but I have crafted my Doom and my Zalus Bane this week. That's been a lot of fun, just been taking a little bit of time to get those guys leveled up. Also, taking some inspiration from my co-host here, working on these builds. Starting out with Solar and then Stasis. Those have just been my couple go-tos very recently. And then I'll be posting Void and Arc later on in this week as I kind of hone that in. But very cool. Honestly, very happy to see this all in a much more easy to navigate kind of format with the pages or the forms function in Discord. Even just that change from the threads that we previously had was pretty nice, honestly. Court, what can you tell us about the update we got this past week?
Yeah, so we actually had 2 updates last week from when we're recording this. So, Bungie are busy at work. They've got stuff to do for this season. But the biggest sort of highlights are related to Kingsfall, Loreley Splendor, and some abilities. We do have some bug fixes related to the Basilica, which is the totems encounter, and Oryx encounter, where there were just some issues where people could die and then just keep wiping every time they were revived. Some Triumph requirements have been the text strings have been made a lot more clear. I did finish the Overzealous one, which again is the Basilica Triumph. Not the challenge, we don't have access to them at the time of this recording, but just the general Triumph for that encounter. The red box runes have been properly fixed. I've noticed that. That is the secret deep sight weapon chest puzzle. That was a very painful one, especially you'd go through a lot of the encounters and just have a really hard time getting those runes up and not getting that red box at the end and having to do another run, and then that doesn't work, and then the third one still doesn't work, so you have to do a fourth run, and which I've been wanting to do anyway for the to bolster up my raid spoils, but it's annoying, but it's been fixed so far. I've not noticed any issues with that. Kingsfall carry stat has been properly implemented as well, and there's some buffs and debuffs which were missing, which we will of course get into a lot more detail when we do our breakdown of Kingsfall. That's the auras of Unraveler, Weaver, Unstable Light, and Channeling Corrupted Light. Lowerly Splendor, that has been nerfed a little bit there. It's been readjusted to grant 1 times restoration from 2, and is now and that applies to PvE and PvP. For abilities, they fixed an issue with Storm Trance's damage was not increasing over time while attacking. I think prior to Arc 3.0, that was, you were doing effectively double damage. You'd ramp up that damage up to double. I'm not sure if it's still double now, but that's a nice little fix for our Storm Trance friends. Some very interesting one here with the Fist of Havoc could be activated while the player was in an active ballistic slam. If you've seen any of the clips, it looked really ridiculous, and a lot of people were wanting this as a feature. So maybe in the future we'll get like a 4th aspect slot where you can do this massive leap. So that's been fixed, much to the dismay of some Titans. And another one related to some melee triggers, notably Shiver Strike and Thunderclap. They have been fixed where they were not activating at close range when using the charged melee keybind. I did notice that when I was playing around on Titan, because I do use that keybind. It was quite annoying. A little highlight from the TWAB, the most recent TWAB, which was the 13th of September. Just talking about Master Mode. Master Mode does open up on Tuesday, Tuesday 20th of September. Again, this probably by the time the podcast goes up, the Master Mode will be up. As just a little reminder, Master Loot does reward, so for encounters it rewards stat focused armor. For the challenges it rewards the adept weapons, and all encounters are set at power level 1600. So to put that in perspective, that's powerful cap of 1570 plus 30. Alternatively, that's pinnacle cap of 1580 plus 20 power. The normal mode challenges will also be active during this period as well, and you'll get the rewards double loot for the encounter while the challenge is active. This wasn't mentioned in the TWAB, but I know some people have been asking for Master Vow Disciple. That is part of the raid rotation. So by the time this episode goes up, we'll have Vow the Disciple as the current rotating raid, and you can pop in and do some Master Mode challenges where they'll be all active, and you can also farm to your heart's content. So, all right, let's get on to the big topic of this episode. Impetus, what are we talking about with Kingsfall?
Yeah, so we're going to start with the raid breakdown here. This is mostly going to be an activity overview, kind of what to expect, and then we'll go in bit by bit through the various encounters. So we're going to start with kind of a big picture, what you need to know. There are champions in this raid. Thankfully, they're only in one encounter. This is, again, all of this information is going to be pertaining to the normal mode. Master mode will have additional champions and additional modifiers. We're not going to talk about that today. So all you need to be worried about is an unstoppable ogre that will spawn in a specific encounter we'll talk about a little bit later on. For this season, that is going to be your options for unstoppable are going to be pulse rifle, shotgun, and solar melee. So if you are listening to this in a later season, the exotics that we have that provide intrinsic unstop are now Malfeasance, Bastion, Devil's Ruin, Leviathan's Breath, and Athrus's Embrace for the hunters. Shields, we've got all three, Arc, Solar, and Void. I don't think outside of the very final encounter you can get all three in the same. Solar is going to be the most common one. A lot of Hive Wizards have a Solar Shield, so you'll see that in almost every encounter, I believe. So, but all three are present throughout. We'll go in depth through the activity modifiers and then kind of noteworthy enemies as they appear as we go through the raid here. So, important thing to note, of course, this is a raid. It's 6-person activities, so please check with your teammates to synergize builds, especially if you're going into this for the first time. That's going to make your damage when you need to deal a lot of damage to a boss enemy a lot easier. It's going to help you stay alive if you know who on your team has a support super like a Well of Radiance or a Ward of Dawn. Always remember that we want to prioritize survivability first while you're getting a feeling for the encounters, and then once you feel more comfortable with enemy spawns, the mechanics, all of that, you can start pivoting towards more damage-oriented builds. I'm going to list off a bunch of weapons right now, both exotic and legendary. We're going to tell you why we recommended those, but these are kind of the best picks for the raid in general. And as we go through the encounters, we're just going to pick them off the list and tell you why we like them so much. So for exotic primaries, if you are looking to bring that in, or if you have a favorite amongst this list, you should know that these will do quite well. Outbreak Perfected is going to be great. Osteostriga, Crimson, Risk Runner, Sunshot. Legendary primaries, weapons with elemental perks are going to be very, very strong here. We're talking Volt Shot, Headstone, Incandescent, that kind of a thing. So for Incandescent, the BXR Battler, Mini Tool, or the Zowli's Bane. We'll talk about that later on in the podcast. Volt Shot, that's our new Arc one. Brigand's Law and Tarnished Metal are going to be great options here. And then, of course, Headstone is the most common one. You've got Crate, Syncopation, Ias Luna, New Purpose, or Blood Feud. Those are going to be fantastic if you happen to be on stasis. For special exotics, Wither Horde, Arbalist, Augur's Scepter, Izanagi's Burden, Divinity, kind of the tried and true classics here. On the legendary special side, Waveframe grenade launchers, Blinding grenade launchers, and Chill Clip fusion rifles are going to be great. On the heavy side, starting with the exotics, some surprising recommendations here. We've got Thunderlord, Sleeper Simulant, and Xenophage. Fantastic weapons for a number of these encounters. On the legendary side, we are recommending linear fusion rifles as a choice for damage for boss fights. So the big ones on that front are going to be Cataclysmic. That's the solar one that drops from Val the Disciple. We've already done a raid breakdown or a weapon breakdown for this, but again, just as a reminder, that's going to be 4 times the charm, and then Bait and Switch is the perk combo you're looking for on Cataclysmic. We've got two Viced options here, one for Stasis and one for Void. The brand new Taipan, that is going to be fantastic with Triple Tap and Firing Line. And then on the Stasis front is going to be Reed's Regret, that drops from Trials. Same roll, Triple Tap, Firing Line. Both of those weapons have the Viced Stinger Origin trait, which really helps out with longer damage phases. And then, of course, on the Arc front, Storm Chaser is the best option. The Aggressive Burst, that comes from the Duality Dungeon. You can go with Rapid Hit, Clown Cartridge, Auto-Loading Holster, and then Firing Line for your damage perk in column 4. Those are going to be our recommendations for all of the damage portions of the boss fights in this raid. You could also, if you really want to, use Adaptive or Aggressive Frame Explosive Light Rocket Launchers if you do not have an LFR. However, LFRs can be used in the middle and close ranges for doing damage to high health targets, whereas with rocket launchers, you have a chance to blow yourself up. So that can be a bit of a risk, but for some of the longer range fights, rockets are definitely the play here. But remember, Taipan is craftable. Cataclysmic is also craftable if you've been doing the Val raid. Taipan has a quest that will give you that LFR specifically, the 2 red bordered versions of that weapon, and some crafting materials. So that is going to be our number one recommendation. LFRs really just are kind of the safe, simple play right now. And then you can swap out to other weapons to really maximize DPS. Now we're going to take some time to talk about some artifact mods. These are seasonal exclusives, so if you're listening to this in a later season, you can probably disregard some of this. But for right now, if you're wondering what to really focus on, some of the mods that stuck out for this season's artifact: Inferno Whip, that is the solar melee that provides unstop. That's going to be really great for dealing with the unstoppable ogre that shows up. Unstop pulse rifle, of course, we've already mentioned that. Thermoshock plating is going to be huge here. That is giving you both arc and solar damage resistance. A lot of hive and taken enemies deal arc and solar damage, so that's going to really help you there. And then, of course, if you are committing to the LFR as your heavy weapon of damage choice, you're going to want to make sure you're running the respective scavenger, ammo finder, holster mods there. If you're trying to use a machine gun, which we do recommend for a few of the encounters, make sure that you also have scav and holster. Basically, you want to be looking out for your heavy weapon, making sure that you have enough ammo in the magazine that you're getting it to drop, and then also putting bullets into the mag so that when you do swap to it, it's there for you. And then the final mod we'll just put out there is going to be Focusing Strike, another really solid artifact mod. All right, now we're going to get into the good stuff. We're going to start off with the opening encounter. This is when you all 6 will spawn in what you need to do to get the raid up and running here. We're going to call this kind of the relic entrance. I believe it is The technical name is the Hall of Souls. First thing you need to know about this opening section is not a darkness zone. That means you have unlimited time to finish, and the only way you can wipe is if all 6 of you die due to unrelated reasons. There isn't a wipe mechanic per se other than enemies all killing you. So you do have plenty of time to do this. You want to split your 6-person team up into 2 sections, so 2 teams of 3, and you're just going to be taking directions with that. So the first team is going to take the left path down and go cover that section of the arena, and then the second team is going to take the right path to the right section. The objectives here, you are dunking 2 orbs into the same statue within 5 seconds of each other before your timer runs out. So you'll be picking up relics. They will have a timer when you pick up. That is not when you both pick up. That is when one person will pick up a relic. A timer is started. So you want to make sure that you are picking up these relics at the same time. You are then running to a statue where you will dunk both of them at the same statue within the course of 5 seconds. As you keep doing this, going from statue to statue, there are 6 statues in total, the orbs are going to spawn further right and left over the course of the encounter, and you will have additional time to pick them up and dunk them in the respective statue. There are some obstacles to this. You will have enemies and then a physical obstacle that will hinder your progress as you attempt to dunk. After all of the statues have been activated, you will simply kill some enemies right outside of the portal room to complete the encounter, and then the portal, you will go through that for the chest and the rewards. Before we get into some strategies and details here, I do just want to mention, we've already talked about this a little bit, the red border chest you might have been hearing some people talk about. Before you leave this opening section, that is before you go through the portal to go pick up your loot after you've done the encounter, you want to head under the portal platform. You will find 3 hive runes that are lit up. 2 of them are going to be on the wall, 1 on the right wall, 1 on the left wall when you turn around, and then you're going to have a central one that is on the ceiling of that portal platform. These runes can be found throughout the raid, and you must shoot them to activate them. Once all 3 of the correct runes have been shot, you will unlock an additional chest that will spawn at the end of the raid with the final boss chest. And this special chest will always drop a red-bordered weapon for your first completion of King's Fall per account per week. So you can guarantee yourself a random red-bordered raid weapon for crafting, as all of these weapons can be crafted. This is on a knockout system. This is the only chest that is on a knockout system. So once you craft any one of these weapons, you will not get a red-bordered version of that weapon to drop from this chest. However, you can still get red-bordered versions of the weapons to drop from other encounter completions, which can be frustrating. So this is definitely something, if you want to craft any of these weapons, when we get into the weapon breakdowns later on, this is definitely something that you should be going for when you are doing your first King's Fall run of the week on whatever character that happens to be. So don't forget about this. You need to figure out which runes you need to shoot before you go to the rest of the raid. Otherwise, you won't be able to get the chest to spawn. And again, that's only for your first completion per week per account. So just remember that that's there. Now for the actual strategy here. Again, we're split up into 2 teams of 3. So you want to have somebody who's going to be your dunker, the person that's going to be picking up. That person is going to coordinate with somebody on the other team who's on the opposite side of the arena. They're going to pick it up at the same time and then start making their way back to the hall where the statues are. As for the other 2 people on the team, your job is to basically escort your dunker through the arena. You are going to be shooting ads that spawn in once the relics are picked up. And then you are also shooting the blights that will appear in doorways. There's going to be 2 different rounds of blights that appear, taken blights that appear in the doorway that will block off progress. The relic person will not be able to use their weapons, so this is why we have the 2 other people there to escort. You need to shoot those. The priority here is always to open up the doorways. Don't worry about killing the ads right away. The ads will shift their focus to players who are kind of engaging with them or whoever closest. So if you are all next to the dunker can kind of just keep walking through the arena while the other 2 are shooting ads, but you want to make sure that the doorways are clear so that the dunker doesn't have to stop, because the dunker is on a timer. So that means that as you are moving through this arena, your close quarter abilities and weapons are going to be the priority here. You want stuff that's going to be close range. We're going to give you some specific stuff in just a moment, but don't use sniper rifles, don't use rocket launchers. This is all close range stuff. Is going to be really effective here. Some things to know about holding the relic as you are moving. When you pick up the relic, your jump ability is completely hindered. You can do one jump, but you can't do any special jumps depending on what your class is. You do have some movement options here. Icarus Dash, Shadow Dive, and Trapper's Ambush do work while you are running with the relic. I don't know if there's anything on Titan, any other things, but you can't do any of the bashing, the special melee attacks. You can melee with the relic, but it's its own separate melee, and you can't do any charged melees. So you are going to be basically on the ground for the most part, and you do have one jump. It's just a single, it's not like a double or a triple or a glide or anything. It's just a regular jump that you have access to when you're holding the relic. If you are unable to dunk in time, your relic will despawn, and the same two relics will reappear at their original positions. Again, you're not going to wipe if it doesn't happen, but you will have to redo it all over again. So this is really just making sure that you are coordinated, that your dunkers are coordinated. One thing to note here, I said earlier that you have to dunk the two orbs into the same statue within 5 seconds of each other. If for whatever reason one dunker is much further ahead than another dunker, and it doesn't look like that last dunker is going to be able to make it before the timer runs out, right as the timer hits about 1 second, have the person that's already by the statue with theirs dunk. That will add 5 seconds immediately. So this is a great way. This is pretty much the only way you can extend your timer. Yeah, it'll whenever one person dunks, the timer is immediately set to 5 seconds and then starts counting down from there. So that can be useful for you if you need to give one person who is trying to dunk a little bit of extra time as they are running into the statue or running into the hallway with the statues to go in and get that dunk. So last thing I'll say before we start talking about specific builds, abilities, and weapon recommendations, when you are holding the relic, you are in third person. So just be aware of that. That should give you some ability to kind of see where enemies are, call those out to your teammates while they're shooting the blights and then dealing with the enemies. But that is the last of the mechanics here. Now we're going to get into kind of the stuff that really works well here. So for recommended builds and weapons, I'll start with weapons here. This is the encounter where exotic machine guns really, really, really shine. Thunderlord and Xenophage are far and away amazing here. Thunderlord is great for immediately clearing out adds as they spawn in once the relics get picked up. Xenophage can do the exact same thing. I like using Xenophage here because Xenophage will pretty much one-shot the taken blights that are blocking the doorway, so that's really great if I'm not dunking or if I'm not holding the relic. I can immediately clear doorways for my dunker. Grand Overture can also work for killing adds, but I think Thunderlord probably does its job just a little bit better here. Shotguns are also a great option if you're looking for an energy or kinetic option. Close range, again, going to be really great for killing those enemies. Waveframe grenade launchers also are going to be extremely potent here. Speaking of grenades, we've got some really great options for kind of that clearing out the entire ad wave or just locking down a section where enemies will spawn in. So Vortex and Void Wall, fantastic options on Void subclasses. Solar and Thermite are going to be really awesome for Solar subclasses, and then Storm Grenades are going to be fantastic for anyone who is on an Arc subclass. That is going to be the ones that we'll recommend there. If you are running Stasis here, you could use something like Bleak Watcher, Dusk Field Grenades if you want to just lock down enemies as they spawn in. Blinding Grenades would have the same effect here. Just be aware that all this is doing is preventing the enemies from shooting at the dunker, which is useful, but you still need to kill them eventually, whereas with Vortex, Void Wall, Solar, Thermite, and Storm, you're killing them and then, of course, preventing them from shooting. So Stasis isn't bad, but I would still probably push you towards the light subclasses just for some offense with your defense, and that'll make the encounter speed up quite quickly. You will get enemy waves that spawn in every single time you go to pick up the next set of relics. So it's a lot of ad clear, a lot of just going fast, coordinating, counting down your timer, calling out if you need some more time. And you'll do this for 6 statues. Then you have a few more enemies to kill in the portal room, and you will move on. As for abilities here, really ad clear supers. You can roaming supers would work fine here. Single stuff like Nova Bomb probably wouldn't be a great option here. I guess you could do Blade Barrage if you really wanted to over Golden Gun. That would be a fine option. Thunder Crash could certainly be nice for landing right on an ad wave, but really anything here is going to be great. You don't need Well, you don't need Ward of Dawn. This isn't going to be too challenging of an encounter. You're dealing mostly with minor and major enemies throughout. There are no bosses, so should be relatively straightforward. You're going to hop through the portal and continue on to the next encounter. We do have a pretty infamous jumping section coming up with the ships. There's really just one path to follow here. It's probably best if you watch a video to figure out the exact location of all the ships that spawn in and spawn out. I'm not going to attempt to describe the path here for you just using my voice. So we're going to go on to the first proper encounter. That is going to be the Totems encounter. Before I do, Court Saint, anything you want to add in regards to subclasses, things that you've found that work really well for Hunters and Titans in the opening section?
There's a shortcut you can take. It's one thing I wanted to add on. If you
Okay, yes, for the experts. Yeah.
I was like, let's get to the whole explanation, and then I'll like throw this little bit at the end. After you dunk at the statue, you can go down to where the actual like little Court of Works area is there, and the floor has like this acidy looking effect on it, so you can't really stand on it for long. But if you jump on that and then you go to your right or to the left and kind of like peel out from there, there are little platforms you can jump to, and then you can take a little shortcut back to the running platform. So if you want to speed up your encounter and you have your teammates waiting to rotate in, you can kind of all flow through this one by one and really get it done quick. Totally not necessary, but it's kind of nice. Court, you got anything?
No, I mean, really, machine guns are your best friend here. Of all the runs I've performed on all classes, Hunter, Warlock, and Titan, I've always just pulled out a machine gun, and the same can be said for the next encounter as well. But this is just a nice sort of easy setup, and you're getting used to. Although you won't be using a relic later on, you'll get used to something that you will have to get yourself, and that is the buff that you'll be using for X, Y, Z encounter. But for Hunter specifically, I mean, Arcstrider's pretty good here. If you don't have the relic yourself, Arcstrider just at clearing any ads, getting in the way, and pretty simple.
Yeah, opening encounter shouldn't be too hard here. You've got all the time in the world to do all 6 statues. You do not have all the time in the world to do the next encounter. That is a Basilica. We kind of refer to this as the Totems encounter. So again, we're going to have a similar team composition here. It's going to be 2 teams of 3. Broadly speaking, this is essentially a relay race that you are having your 2 teams do. You're going to be trading off, calling things out. You have timers again. You're just going to be swapping, making sure that you're managing various buffs, that you're managing enemies on your side of the arena, and depositing. That's another big part here. So again, first team, you're going to be taking kind of the left area. That's going to have a totem in there. And then second team is going to be taking the right totem. Left totem has taken spawns and right totem has hive spawns. Shouldn't be too big of a deal on legend difficulty, but for the one side with Taken, of course, you could put Taken spec on your legendary weapons if you so choose. Within your 2 teams of 3, you are going to want to designate person 1, person 2, person 3 for this order. Again, it's a relay, so this will matter. Person number 1, you are going to pick up the initial brand to start the encounter. The brand is going to spawn kind of slowly down the hallway to the left or right side of the arena. It's going to show up twice, one on each side. It's going to look like a faintly glowing orb that's pulsating. You're going to pick this brand up. You are then you're going to do it at the same time. The person on the left and the person on the right going to pick it up, and then you're going to run all the way into the room to a plate that is at the far back. There is going to be a strange floating structure over this. That is the Annihilator Totem, and that is where you go stand underneath. When you stand on this plate underneath the totem, you are going to start killing ads. When you kill ads, you will gather a stack of Death Singer's Power. That is a buff that we need. We are going to use Death Singer's Power to open a door. When you first come into this space, you will see a door that is blocked off with taken blights. You cannot shoot this blight. That's going to be permanently blocked off. We need to charge up the door with stacks of Death Singer's Power. Once we have the door fully charged, we can progress on to the next encounter. So we are picking up Death Singer's Power by standing on Annihilator totems with the brand. We are then going to have our second person come and swap off and take the brand away from the first person so they can go charge up the door. But in order to do that, person number 2 needs to kill a few enemies. So the first thing that person number 2 on teams 1 and 2 will do is they're going to jump to an upper platform. The upper platform will show up on the left side of the central room and the right side of the central room. On that upper platform, a hive wizard with a solar shield will come out of a door. We are going to kill that wizard quickly. Again, a machine gun is going to be really great here, especially Xenophage, for getting that wizard down. When the wizard dies, a second enemy is going to spawn in. That is going to be a Taken Knight that will show up on that upper platform. It is a Blight Guard, I believe is the technical name. Killing the Blight Guard will give you another brand. You're going to pick that up. The brand will always appear in the middle of that upper platform. So if the Hive Knight, if the Taken Knight happens to move around, you are going to have to. It could be the case that the Blight doesn't drop on their dead body. It drops in the middle of the upper platform there. Picking that up will grab the brand claimer. That's the buff that will show up on your screen. When you have that, person number 2, your job is to immediately go to person number 1, who is down in the room standing on the Annihilator Totem killing ads. You're going to run all the way down that hallway. When you're running down the hallway with the brand claimer, you want to call out to person number 1, I have the brand claimer. What is your timer? Because as you have, when you're standing on the Annihilator Totem with the initial brand, you will have a timer counting down. I believe it's 20 seconds. Is that right, fellas? Or is it 25 seconds? I can't remember the exact time for person number 1 when they pick it up. It is at least 20 seconds. I know it's at least 20 seconds.
Yeah.
You are going to be counting that down. So person number 2, you are running to person number 1. You want to call out to person number 1, how much time do you have left? That person might say, typically by the time that you're going fast, you'll say, I have about 10 seconds. So person number 2, you're going to go stand on the Annihilator Totem with person number 1. Person number 1, when you get to 5 seconds left on your brand, you are going to start counting that, calling that out for person number 2. You say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Person number 2, when you get to when you hear 1, you want to steal the brand. You are going to use your use key, whatever that is, depending on your input method. You're going to press that down and steal the brand from person number 1, and then you will become the person who is killing ads on the Annihilator Totem.
Sorry, I just want to jump in and say it's 30 seconds.
It is 30 seconds.
Brand. Yep.
Perfect. So that's what person number 1, when you pick up your brand, 30 seconds. That's how much time you have here. You need to stand on the plate with this brand. If you do not stand on the plate will start glowing red, and the Annihilator Totem will annihilate your entire fire team. So that is how you wipe. So we want to do this on the plate to make sure that we are always activating the Annihilator Totem so that it does not kill us. So that's why you do it there. Person number 1, after your brand has been stolen, you are going to run back to the middle room. You will have your your stacks of Deathsinger's power. Now it is your time to go deposit those into the central plate in the middle of the room. So that is what you are doing right now. You're going to stand on the middle plate. The plate will consume your stacks in orders of 2. So you want to do that all the way until you are completely out of stacks. You will have ads that are spawning through that taken door that we're trying to get through. You want to ignore those enemies because they are going to ignore you. The enemies that come through that door are going to split to the left and the right side and go and attack anyone that is standing on the Annihilator Totem. And remember, the person that is standing on the Annihilator Totem needs to be killing ads. So it's kind of a weird setup. You're going to have a lot of enemies spawning in. You're not actually interested in killing any of those enemies if you are not standing on the Annihilator Totem plate, because the person that is on the plate should be doing that to get these stacks of Deathsinger's power. It sounds kind of confusing, but it actually makes sense for how we progress through the encounter. So while you are standing on that middle plate in the central room, an unstoppable ogre is going to appear directly in front of you. It will come out of the ground. There's going to be a black puddle. You are going to wait for the unstoppable ogre to come all the way out of the puddle and land on the ground in front of the puddle before you stagger the ogre. If you try to stun the ogre when it's first crawling out of the ground, it's not going to work all the way. So you want to make sure for them to be fully on the ground, focusing on you. Then you can stun them. Again, we've got shotgun and pulse rifle for weapons are going to be really great here. Or if you want to use one of the exotics, that's going to be an excellent option. Make sure you're standing on the plate. You need to get rid of all of your stacks of Deathsinger's power. Otherwise, you will not be able to pick up the brand and the brand claimer. So that is very important. After you've dealt with the unstoppable ogre, you then will jump up to the platform up above you, where you will go through the same steps that person number 2 did, where you kill the wizard and then the knight. I didn't want to forget about person number 3. After person number 1 has gone to the central platform to start depositing their stacks, you're going to go through the same steps. So you'll be up on the upper platform. You can help kill the wizard. You can help kill the Taken Knight. But person number 2 is going to pick up the first blight, and then they're going to run down and replace person number 1. You're going to stand up on that upper platform. You're going to wait for your Hive Wizard to show up. You're going to kill the Hive Wizard. The Blightguard Knight will spawn after the wizard dies. You're going to kill that. You're going to pick up the Brand Claimer, and then you are going to call out to person number 2, who is on the Annihilator Totem. You're going to say, person number 2, what is your timer? I am coming to you. They're going to call out how much time they have left, and then you're going to go run and join them. Stand on the Annihilator Totem. You can throw down a rift, throw down a barricade to help them out, as they're going to be taking damage from all the ads trying to kill them. Do not kill the ads, because we want the person standing on the Annihilator Totem to have as much stacks of Deathsinger's power as possible. Once their timer runs down to 1 or 2 seconds, you will hold your use key, steal the brand, and then you are going to go run and stand on the central plate to deposit your stacks. So again, that is the relay that you are all doing here. So the right side, your Hive enemy side, the brand that you are picking up is Brand of the Weaver. Left side, you have the Taken Enemies. You are the Brand of the Unraveler. Those are the names there. And then the person that is picking up the brand from person number 1 has the Brand Claimer pickup there. And then you are gathering stacks of Deathsinger's power. Those are the technical names of all of our buffs and debuffs and the mechanics here. So again, when we talk about what to use for builds and weapons, machine guns, especially the exotic ones, are going to be great here for quickly killing ads to get as many stacks of Deathsinger's power as possible. You want a hard-hitting weapon here. That is going to be really, really important. I was doing a run the other night with some people that had some primary weapons for ad clear. Osteostrigo is definitely going to be strong here, but I would say depending on your prowess, you're not going to have to worry about too many boss enemies. The Blightguard Knights are mini bosses, but they can still be killed quite quickly with something like Thunderlord or Xenophage or a shotgun. So you can feel free to use an ad clear heavy weapon in the machine guns. It's going to be actually really useful. You want to kill enemies quickly because you're on a timer. So you want to give yourself as much time as possible. Xenophage is going to be perfect for this. You do also want to have something a little bit longer range. When you're in the room standing on the Annihilator Totems, you will have plenty of enemies that try to run up to you, that will try to melee you, but you also have enemies that are going to stay back and kind of beam you from afar. So a weapon that is a little bit more mid-range is going to be really great here. So you can use a shotgun to maybe kill enemies that come close to you, but then you want a longer range weapon, either in the heavy slot or the energy or kinetic, just to round things out. Fusion rifles would also work here. Waveframe grenade launchers are going to be great for the enemies on the ground. Definitely recommend that. Court, what do you recommend for hunters for their setups here?
So for those that are gathering their stacks of Deathsinger's power, you want to go for Tether or Revenant. Some really classic kind of control / utility supers there. I've also been running Thunderlord quite a lot during this encounter. I feel like every time I come to the totems encounter here, that I just quickly swap to Thunderlord and just let that machine gun sing, because it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of power. I will point out that on the right side we'll have slightly more ads. Well, I say slightly. There's going to be a lot more ads on the Hive side than there are on the Taken side. So Hive side will be able to get their Deathsinger's power up a lot quicker than compared to the Taken side. And I think most of the time I've been in this encounter, I've been on the right side, and I've noticed quite a lot that there are spawns of Hive Boomer Knights that are up on these high upper platforms. Is one of the platforms where you do have to get one of the bonus runes to activate, but you will need some kind of long-range weapons here, whether that's a pulse or a scout rifle or even a sniper rifle. Thunderlord can do work. It can extend its range up there, but just a sort of fair warning that if you leave them unchecked, they can start to ruin your day, including on normal mode. I've ran a few runs where I've returned back to the Annihilator Totem, and we've got about 3 Hive Knights shooting down at me, and I can't really deal with it. So, yeah. For Hunter, it's pretty standard stuff. You can use Blade Barrage as well, and Gathering Storm can be an acceptable use of super in this area as well. What about you? What are you thinking, Saint for the Titans?
Yeah, I'm big. This encounter right here is actually what got me to go through my loadouts and then eventually pick Ember of Empyrean, which has since become a dominating feature in all of my solar loadouts. Empyrean, I could go on about Empyrean for hours, but I'll say that basically when you have Restoration or Radiance up and you get a kill, depending on the tier of the enemy, it will extend the duration of these buffs. It's like maybe 3 seconds for a smaller enemy, your red bars, your miners, and then maybe like 5 or 6 seconds, something like that for a larger enemy. With your Solace on, you can max that out at about 12 seconds. You pair this with like a Battler and a Xenophage, and you just have unlimited restoration up all the time, and it's kind of nuts, honestly, how insanely effective this is. But yeah, I just love Xeno, and it just so happens to be a great fit for this encounter, which brings joy to my Titan heart. Impetus, any Warlock pro tips here?
Yeah, you can use any element here and have a great time. I'll start with Stasis. Shadebinder is going to be huge here. Depending on when you want to pop that super that you get from the Rally Banner, you can make that your first go through, or you save it a little bit later on. But Bleak Watcher turrets are going to be really helpful for just slowing stuff down, keeping yourself from getting overwhelmed. And then also, they'll stick around after you get swapped out and you go deposit your buffs, so that can be very helpful for your team as well. Void, of course, Controverse holds with those Vortex grenades, going to be fantastic for slowing enemies down if they're trying to rush you. Those Hive Knights in particular can be really annoying. Also, just great ad clear, throw directly in front of you. You'll have those enemies coming from the central room kind of in a single file line, so you can stop them dead in your tracks. On the Arc front, Arc Soul is also going to be nice for kind of pointing out enemies that are firing at you if you aren't already aware of them. I would also say that Chaos Reach would be a really good super here for just melting a lot of enemies quickly, especially the ones that are coming down that tunnel single file line. You can get a lot of stacks quickly, and then you can also, you don't have to do the full super, so you can stop halfway through, conserve a little bit of that super energy. That's going to be fantastic. And then, of course, Solar. I mean, yeah. You fell in love with Starfire Protocol last season, guess what? Just plop a Rift down or a Well down on the Annihilator Totem. You can use Wither Horde, you can use Anarchy directly in front of you, and then just start chucking fusion grenades. You do not have to go pick up the Death Singer's buff. It will automatically be applied to your character when you kill enemies, so that is going to be really great there. Make sure you got some Elemental Wells coming to you from the Seeking Wells Arc mod. That's going to be so helpful for getting ability energy back. But yeah, Warlocks, you've got plenty of great options here. Really just throw grenades. It's going to be so huge for all the classes. Make it very, very easy. And as the door gets charged up, you're going to keep going through that, keep cycling through on each side. Once the door is fully charged up, you can see runes on the doorway will start lighting up as you deposit more and more stacks. The enemies will all disappear. You're going to lose your buffs and your debuffs, and then you're going to move on to the War Priest. Court, what can we expect in the second encounter?
Well, War Priest is the first big damage check encounter here. So much that I know, Saint here, you did the day one raids. A big barrier for a lot of teams. Not so much now. It's not as much of a kind of blockade, but you will need to really concentrate on your firepower here. There's a lot going on. I'll try my best to explain the sort of mechanics around here, but this is your big first damage check. So you will be after sort of LFRs. If you don't have any good LFRs, Sleeper Simulant's a sort of natural go-to for an exotic or for rocket launchers. But first, let's talk about the team composition. Just before we do that, I'll quickly summarize the location where everything's going to be and where things will spawn. So you do have a giant blight that is the sort of in the center, and at the back at the center of this encounter. It's not necessarily something you're going to be damaging. It is something which will be kind of part of the encounter. To the left of that and to the right, you do have some ad spawn doors, and behind those, you will have these plates. So upper left, high up on left, you have a plate. In the middle of the room, you also have another plate. And on the right side, not so much high, you do have another plate. So there's 3 plates. We're going to split things up into 3 teams of 2. So the first team will be up on the left plate, second team middle, and the third team right. Within these teams, you will also need to split into what I'm going to call as the plate stepper and the night hunter, and separately the damage person. So the plate stepper, which will also be the night hunter, people will step on their plates in order. We'll get into that just very shortly. And the damage person will not have to worry about this. They will just be doing damage when it comes to it. So what's the process to get to this plate stepping process? So a bunch of ads will spawn. Sorry, I should say, to actually begin this encounter, just have all the plates stepped on, and that'll begin things. For the next, I would say, a minute and a half, you'd have just ads spawning in. The War Priest will be in. He will be immune. You will not be able to damage him. But for the time being, you're getting the classic style of here's a bunch of ads, and eventually you'll start to get these mini boss wizards. These don't really have any direct mechanic to this encounter, but they sort of signify, right, we're getting to the sort of the peak of where we're about to do damage to the boss. So we'll kill those mini boss wizards. They are good fodder for Aeon Gauntlet users if you're using them. Just before we start things off with the plates, there will be an Elite Hive Revenant Knight. These are sort of semi-special. They perform special arc wave attacks, kind of similar to the knights that have the hive swords. You'll have 1 per side, so 1 on left, middle, and right. And killing these will start the glyph reading sequence. So what do I mean about that? So this is where the plate steppers will be coming in. So to start off the glyph reading, the middle person jumps onto their plate. They will need to find out what will be the... It's a bit complicated to sort of describe, because the middle plate doesn't necessarily... They're not the first person to step on. They're the ones that are starting the glyph reading. So the middle person steps on. They will see who is going to be the first person to step on to actually begin the first, second, and third plate steppers. Middle person looks up to these pillars. They are quite thin, high pillars, and behind the pillars, you will be able just about to see these sort of illuminated signals. The middle person will be the one that has to call out which one is lit up. So if it's left side that's lit up, left person will begin. So the middle person will step off, left person jumps on. The left person now needs to signify who the next person to jump on their plate. They can see, if I'm right to say, they can see right, but they can see middle, but they can't see right, or is it the other way around when it comes to the angles? This is the sort of kind of complicated way to describe things, because as the plate steppers are on their plate, they can see one pillar but not the other. So if you cannot see a illuminated signal, it means the one that you can't see is the next one. So let's say left side's up first, then it's middle side, and then the right. So the last person that stands on their plate, they get a brand of the Initiate. That is where you begin to do damage. Where you want to do damage is really up to your teams. There is some advanced strats with the brand, like going up onto either the left or the right side of the encounter, next to the boss, next to War Priest. But if you're starting off here, you want to stay near your pillars. Because when it gets to it, once the big blight, the giant blight in the center of the room, starts to do its Searing Torrent debuff, is where you want to be behind some safety. But before we sort of jump ahead here, I'll loop back around to what I was talking about earlier on about the plate stepper and the night hunter. So the plate steppers, their job is to step on the plates. Those that did not get the brand initiate, so again, using my example, left, middle, right. The right person got the brand of the initiate. The left and the middle plate steppers are now the night hunters. Again, it's going to be a blight guard night, so those taken blight guards will spawn on the left or the middle plates, or near about those plates. So it's their job to kill them and retrieve the brand claimer. So we're noticing a little bit of a trend here when we come to these encounters. Once they get the brand claimer, they will return back to where the damage people are performing their damage. The branded of the initiate person, the right person in this example, they will have a aura surrounding them and a timer. The timer begins at 20 seconds for the first person. This is where you want to call out whoever's doing the sort of brand claimers. You'll have 2 brand claimers who can then swap out the brand of the initiate. The first brand claimer will then pick up the initiate brand just before 0 seconds. So you're wanting to count this down, go for the highlights, like I'm at 10 seconds, I'm at 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The first person picks up before 0 seconds, and they'll have the brand. You'll swap out the brand initiate with that person for 15 seconds now. Again, call it down, call the duration down. Once you get to that, 5-second call, the second brand claimer will pick it up, and they'll just have they'll have the initiate brand for 10 seconds. And once you've done this, once the duration elapses, is when the big giant blight will enter its sear and torrent phase. If you're caught out anywhere where it's not protected by the giant pillars, again, that's left, middle, and right, you will die. And don't try to revive anyone during this phase. If they're just slightly off center, you'll just you'll loop the death. So I think what's difficult about this encounter, especially where you're doing damage, is that War Priest likes to move around a lot. He likes to dart left and right, and he is a fast boy as well. So it's going to be pretty tricky. Again, if you're brand new to this raid, it's going to be maybe a couple of runs. This will be the sort of barricade just to really set you up of what expectations you have for DPS. So there is a lot of movement going on here. You do just want to repeat this process. So once you've used up a pillar, that will disappear. And just to make a note of this, is that standing behind an active pillar, they will get consumed on each searing torrent use, presuming there's any guardians behind it. So that they won't get consumed if there's no guardians behind the pillars, but they will if there is at least one. So if you've got, say, for example, you've got 3 people in middle and 3 people in right, those 2 pillars will get consumed, which isn't ideal because these pillars are effectively now you're on to the next damage phase. So there is a lot going on here. It is really up to teams on how they want to approach this, how they want to get to where they want to do damage from. But again, I would recommend keeping damage near the pillars, just so you can maximize the amount of time you're doing damage to War Priest, and you've got less time to move into those pillars. For actual recommended builds, again, it's really, linear fusion rifles are the kings here when it comes to damage. Rocket launchers, if you've got tracking rocket launchers, perhaps, but it's going to be tricky to really get those damage down. So what can we recommend for these subclasses? I'll start us off with the Hunter. I've been swapping between quite a lot of things using Star Eater skills. I've used Gathering Storm, but sometimes you can miss him, which is, you're getting no super damage. It's very frustrating. I have used I've used Blade Barrage for a lot of the damage phases, but sometimes they can be a bit of hit or miss, even with the fragment that improves the tracking. So I've actually opted to use Golden Gun with Star Eater scales, which is like, whoa, that's quite surprising because it's not, it's not the best for damage, but is the most consistent. And consistent damage here is the best. Gathering Storm and Blade Barrage have the tendency to miss, but at least with Golden Gun, it's entirely up to you if you can hit those crits. Of course, Divinity is the best thing to kind of stack up with your damage buffs and combo with your wells or your bubbles if you're using them. And speaking of which, what can we recommend for Warlock impetus?
Guys, you're never going to guess what I'm about to say, but it's going to be Well of Radiance. That is pretty much the only thing I'm going to recommend here. Even if you have multiple Warlocks in your fire team, Well is going to be so helpful. If this is your first time going through, just staying alive during damage phases is the most important thing. If you have someone go down, they're losing damage. So Well of Radiance is going to be fantastic. I would pair it with Lunafaction Boots. I think that's going to be great for just increasing the reload speed. That can be tremendous, giving health. Depending on how you want to set this up with your fire team composition, if you want to have other people, other hunters and titans who have kind of add clear supers to pop those outside of damage phase to generate orbs of power to get the Well of Radiances back. That can be extremely useful if you're having trouble staying alive during damage phase. But yeah, if you have multiple Warlocks, definitely all of you should be running Well of Radiance. That is going to be so huge. Pop that. Just a note about Well of Radiance and kind of coordinating with your teammates here. Warlocks should be doing damage. You should not be doing the plate stepping and the night hunting unless you have other people that are willing to step in and do the night hunting part specifically. You don't want to have them going off to another area of the map to go hunt down the night if you don't have the well already set up. So just coordinate with your fire team depending on how you're set up, who wants to do what roles. But ideally you want to have the well warlock and whoever's using divinity be the person that's always going to be present during the damage phase, that extended damage phase. So that is my number one recommendation. Just stay alive, provide healing buffs to your fire team members. That's how you're going to beat this encounter. Saint, what do the Titans have for good options here in this encounter?
I think, any of our linear fusion rifles that we mentioned at the beginning are going to be great for damage. My main focus has been just the absolutely pure DPS output loadout, and that is what I'm going to focus on. I've also spent a little time doing the night hunting and stuff like that, but especially, like we were talking about day one, I really do think this is like push it over the edge. The build that I'm talking about is a Stasis Behemoth Titan. You are going to use a Reed's Regret. You're going to use 4 copies of Font of Might. You're going to use 1 copy of Elemental Time Dilation. Now, just like Impetus is saying, you're going to need to be using your super to feed your warlocks, but in return, not only can that warlock generate a well for you, they can also use a mod called Supreme Wellmaker, and that will generate, I believe, 3 stasis wells as soon as they cast their super. So this is really a team-dependent type of loadout, which is why it may be a little hard to achieve. It's also dependent on a weapon that's locked behind trials, which may, not be available to everybody. But if you really want to max it out, if you really want to make Datto proud, there's one way, okay? And that's going to be this Reed's build. And the reason this is so strong is because your warlock teammates cast their rift or their well, that is going to generate stasis wells for you, and that is going to give you a Font of Might for 30 seconds due to the way that your other mods are stacked up. So you have effectively Font of Might and Well of Radiance for 30 seconds straight, and you are able to just output an absolutely absurd amount of damage. Yeah, and then you need to turn around and use your Behemoth Super on the next wave to immediately try to generate as many orbs as you can so that your Warlocks will have both their wells back up whenever you go into the next damage phase. Because if we're thinking about, if we max out our damage phase, we're going to be there for 45 seconds, I guess would be the potential absolute maximum. Even if you miss your swaps a little bit, you're still there for 42 seconds or something like that. So you really do need to be having both those wells up each time. But Yeah, it's a great build. If your teammates are willing to support you, absolutely run that. If not, then I'm probably running solar if I'm doing a night hunting and I'm going to run like, some Loreley or something like that to help keep me alive. I've also used storm grenades to take out the knights, especially if it's up on the top left. That is like hugely helpful. And another tip I would say is if you're hunting the knights, if you're using long range weapons, if you're using a Izanagi's Burden and a linear fusion rifle, don't jump up there and then try to kill him. Stay at the bottom. As soon as the brand swaps or whatever, you start, you need to turn, you can kill the knight and then jump up to the platform and grab the things. You're not trying to hit a headshot from 5 meters away, because you definitely will miss and you definitely will kill your teammates, because it's me, person who missed and killed my teammates. Sorry, Pentad, but it's gotta be like that sometimes. Any other thoughts, you guys?
I will just really hammer down on the point that this is the first and probably the biggest DPS check for this raid. When it comes to the sisters, even Golgoroth and Oryx, they are, they've got an encounter design where you can sort of easily do a lot of damage in a small amount of time. But this, because there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of people coming in and out, swapping buffs, there's a lot of communication in the background as well. That's maybe where a lot of teams kind of really falter, especially if you're brand new. It's either the lack of communication or it's this overlap of communication where people are talking over the timer, or they're talking about one's swapping in, but they weren't supposed to. So there's a lot going on here. This is the damage check. Saint, you mentioned the stasis build there. Even if you don't want to go for the full ×4 font of might, stasis hunters and titans can go for elemental shards as their sort of font of might, sort of bulker upper, because it's comparably easier to spawn them and use them for font of might with Reed's Regret if you have access to that, and do damage there. But it's a tough one. It is a tough one to crack if you're brand new to this encounter. And I think when it comes to Master, this will be the really one. Sort of priority to really hone in on the strategy and the sort of timing when it comes to defeating War Priest.
And that'll be a time. That's like 2 weeks away, huh? Isn't it? If it mimics the other one.
Yeah. We'll see. Yeah, let's go with that. Yeah.
Well.
So next up, there's a little maze section, and if you trigger some plates correctly, you can get a extra secret chest that will spawn in the middle of the room. There's a little 5-plate map. There's a beautiful MS Paint document on the internet. If you Google this, it will surely pop up. That's a really easy one. Don't skip it. And then next, it's on to Golgi's place. Golgoroth is like the massive, guard dog taken pet ogre that is kind of the guarding the entrance to Oryx's domain and his daughters and all that stuff. In this encounter, it is all centered around kind of Golgoroth's pool. There are 2 teams. There is a team of 2 players that will be taunting Golgoroth and taking his gaze, and then the other 4 players will be dealing damage. Right when you come into the room, there is a big gloop, a light orb that is in the top center of the room. When you shoot this thing down, that is what is going to trigger the encounter. And whenever you go to damage phase, there is going to be smaller versions of this orb that you shoot down to stand in to deal damage. There is also kind of a white mechanic that will track the number of buffs that you use per damage phase. So after you get into the fight and you start the damage phase, there are a total of 6 of those small orbs that spawn around up top of the arena. Every time you shoot one down, you can go stand in it, and then you'll be dealing damage to Golgoroth from inside the pool of reclaimed light, is what that buff is called. It lasts about 20 seconds, just about the same time as the gaze buff lasts for the player that is going to be handing that back and forth. It is incredibly important that you're standing in this. It's not like it's giving you like an extra 20%. It's like 10 times damage dealt to the boss. So you're just going to be dealing tiny amounts of damage if you're not actually standing in this buff, the pool of reclaimed light. While you are doing the damage to the boss, there are the players that are taking the gaze, which I'll talk more about in just a second, and there's also the unstable light debuff. If you are a player that has been through Vault of Glass, you are very familiar with this mechanic. This is like the detainment mechanic in VoG, where you get that high-pitched tone, and your screen would start to change, and then you would get detained just a moment after that. In this case, basically, it's kind of like turning you into a cursed thrall, and the damage doesn't damage your teammate, or it does damage your teammates. It doesn't damage you, and it also does damage to the boss. So if you are in a damage phase and you're getting this unstable light debuff, you're going to want to charge at Golgoroth and then detonate, or make sure that you're sitting next to him when the timer goes off, because it will deal like a 500,000 or 600,000 damage. It's an obscene amount of damage that it deals to the boss when you're standing right next to him, and it will also kill all of your teammates if you detonate while you're standing next to them. So really, really want to make sure that you're watching out for that. So talking about the overall flow of this encounter here, you'll kind of split up into 2 teams of 3 and just go over to the left and the right side of the arenas. Lots of ad spawning, lots of thrall, lots of just low-level hive basically coming around. You'll see some wizards, and then eventually a named mini-boss, I believe, tier wizard will walk out of the spawn point there, and that is going to be kind of your last enemy to note before you go into the actual boss phase. They spawn kind of in the back behind the tablet. Whenever you are getting ready to go into your boss phase, you'll see one of those orbs spawn up towards the rally flag back at the front of the arena. Most of the team will gather over there, and then one of the 2 players will get ready to taunt Golgoroth. So in order to taunt him, you need to shoot him in the back. He has what look like spider claws, kind of like coming up off of his back, and they'll expose this really cute looking crit spot back there. And you basically need to hit this with like a precision high damage weapon in order to get his attention. Arbalests, Lawrence Driver, a linear fusion rifle, a high impact sniper rifle. You can use a scout or a bow or a rapid fire sniper or something like that. It just may take 2 or 3 shots. My favorite thing to use is a high impact sniper with Vorpal. Will pretty much always one shot. Arbalest is absolutely great option for this. Whenever you hit Golgoroth in his crit spot, he is going to turn his attention immediately to you, and this will last for about 20 seconds. And he will also send out little Axion Dart taken Seekers that will target only the person that has this taunt buff. If you get hit by one of these, they will poison you for a minute. The Venom debuff, it's just makes the darts a little more lethal, and make sure you need to keep your track on them. You probably can only be hit by 3 of these if you're not running absolutely maxed out resilience and stuff like that. Maybe you could tank a 4th one. It's good to just be in a good survivability build and to have something that you can spray these down with if you're going to be the player that is taking the gaze. Once you get this buff and Golgoroth has his attention on you, you need to kind of walk around the arena so that Golgoroth is then facing your teammates, because Golgoroth's only spot where he can take damage is right in his stomach. So if he's not facing towards your team, then they can't damage him, and the kind of that part of the encounter is a wash. So the flow there is, you get his attention, and then you make your way around the arena towards where your team is standing, and you're kind of standing on the edge of the pool then, while they're standing underneath you and shooting at the boss, and you watch out for the timer. You'll have your partner teammate that is also going to be taunting and taking the gaze from Golgoroth. Will be listening to your timer. When you're at like 10 seconds or whatever, 8 seconds, they're going to be jumping up out of the pool and then trying to hit him in the back to take his next crit spot. At this point, you can then jump in the pool if you're the person that's been handling the gaze, and then you're probably going to want to help your teammates shoot down that next little pool of reclaimed light from the ceiling. And you've got, you have 20 seconds, and that sounds like kind of a long time, but it really is not. If you are the person that is going to be capturing the gaze and jumping in to deal damage, I would recommend something just like hitting him in the chest with a couple of G-horn shots or something like that, or a rocket shot, and then pretty much immediately turning your focus to the orb of light, and then going back to capture his gaze again. So if you're going to be dealing damage like that, you want to make sure that you're using something you can get off in a really quick burst, because you're going to have like 5 seconds to deal damage. in this window. After you capture the gaze and you trade off the gaze, your next player will then move into position for wherever the next pool of light is, and then you just kind of keep repeating this cycle. You need to shoot down 6 of these orbs for this damage phase to complete to fully complete, so to say. And this is important. I mean, it's important not only because Golgoroth has like a massive amount of health, and you just need to be dealing damage to him for like a long time, but also because every one of these orbs that you don't shoot off the ceiling in a damage phase basically counts against you towards a wipe mechanic. You'll see this big tablet in the back, and every time you miss an orb, so like let's say you did a damage phase and you went through 4 orbs, but then you failed to capture his gaze on that pass, then you would have 2 symbols light up. If you get to 6, it just wipes you entirely. So it has some forgiveness to it. You can miss 1 or 2 per round, but really you want to make sure that you're not missing this. And if you really mess up a damage phase, it could add 5 maybe instantly to the totem back there. So just a good thing to keep your eye on. I've talked a lot about the capturing the gaze and kind of passing that back and forth, but if not, you're really just going to want to focus on keeping your eye on that unstable light debuff. It will put a effect on your screen. It gives I believe like a green tinge to your screen, and you get a noise that you can hear very clearly. And then just damaging the boss as much as you can. Court, Impetus, anything to add there? Any recommendations for your classes?
I can start this time. Warlocks, I'm gonna just recommend the setup that you use for War Priest is probably going to help you out here. If you happen to be one of the people that is designed for taking the gaze, for being the taunter, Well and Healing Rift will be helpful for when those orbs, if those orbs do hit you and you start taking damage from those. So that's still useful. But I'm trying to think. I would still probably, just to play it safe, run Well even in that situation. Obviously, if you are down in the pit dealing damage to Golgoroth, Well is going to be very helpful there. You're not going to have opportunities really to generate orbs unless you have somebody standing next to you popping, a damage super just for Golgoroth, but you won't be able to generate as many orbs as you would in the previous encounter if somebody were to go out and do ad clearing and get all those orbs as well. So it'll probably, you won't get as many wells, but you can still make use of the Rift. The Healing Rift is going to be huge there. I would stay still the same recommendation for weapons. It's going to be huge. You can definitely spec into Solar Wells with Cataclysmic if you want to make use of the Font of Might setup there. That's going to be helpful. This is really the time to focus on damage. So even though you are providing support for the fire team, this is the time for you to kind of step up if you were just doing, say, Divinity in War Priest prior. We got to take it to the next level for this encounter just due to the nature of the mechanics. But it's going to be hard. I've seen some people try and do Starfire Protocol. I feel like that can be a little bit difficult for your fire team members if you're chucking the fusion grenade right at his stomach, just because they're trying to hit precision shots. It can be a little distracting and frankly, kind of hard to look at things that are constantly exploding in your face. So the benefit there, of course, though, is that you do get your Rift back pretty quickly, but it's going to be empowering, not healing. But extra weapon damage, again, is still going to be useful. So this is one of those things where you just got to coordinate with your fire team. If you're in a fire team with another Warlock, definitely try to trade off wells, space those out. If you're going for all 6 orbs, maybe do one on orb number 2 and orb number 4 just to maximize stuff. It's a pretty small pit area, so you can pretty easily run through the well after you put it down, just to have some of those buffs a little bit as you're getting over to another orb pool. So it's definitely can be helpful. And again, grenade options when it's up is going to be useful, but for the most part, you're just doing damage with your weapons for the majority of this part. So you do want to make sure that you've got the best possible weapon rolls and that you're maximizing your mods for as much damage as possible. Court, how about yourself for the hunters?
So hunters, you can run either as part of the damage team or as part of the taunter team. For the damage team, you can go for Gathering Storm. That is a sort of really high damage super right now. The Blade Barrage, as you'll probably notice a trend for the rest of the encounters, they're not good in any of these small crit zone encounters. You cannot Blade Barrage, a very small crit zone such as Golgoroth's Stomach. So you'd either want to opt for Golden Gun. Golden Gun with Star Eater scales is the sort of the highest damage compared to Celestial Nighthawk Golden Gun. And also with Golden Gun, when you hit those crits, which should be pretty easy, you will spawn 2 orbs per shot. So you will be getting 6 orbs for the rest of your team. Again, very helpful for your Warlocks or any Titans that are in there, or any other Hunters who have Star Eater scales, just to top up their super or their Star Eater scales. If you're the Hunter taunting, what I've been doing is tossing down a Deadfall tether, maybe after the 2nd or 3rd orb. That's where a lot of the ads start to collect around Golgoroth. Plus, it's a debuff, so if you do have a Divinity user there, they can come off and just take a little break from that and use their high-powered linear fusion rifle, and that until the tether disappears, and swap back to Divinity. So you've got a few choices here. What about Titans there, Saint?
Yeah, I'm sticking with my stasis that reads build that I was talking about, honestly, most of the time, because it just has such a high ceiling for potential damage. And to Impetus's point, usually the Warlock that I'm playing with is going to stick on the same build from War Priest, which means it still like rolls together, right? I've also used just like Sunspots, Solar Titan to keep my team safe with like Phoenix Cradle was a theme, especially in especially in contest mode. I think that will be pretty popular on master mode, because one Titan with a Phoenix Cradle can just fill the entire pool with restoration as they throw hammers in there. So that was really nice, and also really nice to just keep the keep the ads burned back, especially in the by the time you get into the later rounds there. But yeah, I mean, that stasis build is just so strong, man. It's nuts. It is just nuts. Also, I mean, you could make an argument for if my div enjoyer is taking a break, then some debuff nades on the Void Titan with like a Hard Amos Light. So I'm just like constantly putting down Vortex grenades on Golgoroth to keep him debuffed. It's pretty effective, honestly. I think that's all we got for good old Golgi.
Yeah, it's another kind of high burst encounter. So yeah, it's a fun one as well. A lot of movement, a lot of chatter. Next up is our penultimate encounter. That is Oryx's Daughters. Before that, there is a sort of jumping puzzle, if you want to call it. We won't go into too much detail what that entails. I think that's most fun for those that are coming into this raid quite new. Halfway through it, there is a bonus chest, which can be revealed through your ghost, which reveals these sort of these hive platforms. So if you want to dig into the bonus chest, have a look on YouTube for those particular videos. But it's a fun sort of midsection between Golgoroth and Oryx's Daughters. There's a lot of moving walls, shall I say.
That go by many names.
Yes. We won't go into too much detail here. Anyway, once you've reached Oryx's, the next encounter, this will be the final arena, because the next 2 encounters take place here. So for the first sort of arena mode here we have is the Oryx's Daughters. I'm going to sort of flip and talk about the various debuffs and special enemies here first, just to sort of set things up as to what things are going to be on your screen or what you're going to aim for. So we are going to have what is essentially the the damage phase timer, which acts as the wipe mechanic as well. We will have the Dirge of Unraveling, which lasts for 2 minutes, and the Hymn of Weaving, which also lasts for 2 minutes. So they are identical depending on which daughter is performing the ritual. And again, that is the wipe/damage phase timer. So you will be up against the clock here. So as soon as you shoot in that arena is when you start the encounter. For our next sort of important buff is the Torn Between Dimensions buff. A lot of players call it the Taken buff, like I'm torn or I'm taken. The encounter will randomly select someone out of the entire team who will become taken or torn, and their view will flip to third person during this buff. So think back to the introduction of this raid with the relic. You don't have a physical relic with you. You are just in third person. You cannot shoot. You can't use your grenades or anything else like that. You can, of course, use your jump abilities, but that's about it. The Blight Guard makes a reappearance here. It's not a knight now. It is a piece of like an actual piece, an artifact piece that you go around and collect. Only the torn person can see, and these are revealed through the various platforms that I'll get into very shortly. And after that, once you've collected 3 of the Blight Guard pieces, is when you get the Aura of Weaving and the Aura of Unraveling. Again, depending on which daughter that you attack, you will. Once the third piece is collected, the person that has the ability to do so, they can go to the daughter that's attacking people, that's the one that's shooting, and steal their immunity aura, and that is how we are going to do damage. But before we get there, let's do a little bit of team composition. Again, it's going to be 2 teams. It's going to be, we're going to split things up into locations here. There's a lot of names, a lot of locations and callouts. We're just going to go for the simple L1 and R1 and L2 and R2 plates. So for the 1 plates, that's closest to the entrance door, and for the 2 plates, that's the furthest from the entrance door. Again, due to the nature of this encounter, you may be swapping in and out of various responsibilities and tasks, so the encounter will randomly assign someone as being torn, and again, this occurs 3 times per encounter phase. So you could be torn twice out of the 3 times, or you could not be torn at all. So it's really, a lot of hot swapping here. So both teams assign 1 person each to stand near the plates. This is going to be your plate for the next encounter. These people, the third person will now be for each team will be the roamer. So these people will replace the plate person if they've become torn on their side. You'll be wondering why. It's because when a plate is lit up in green, and an elite Hive Revenant Knight will spawn on it as well, the plate person will kill the knight, and they will stand and remain on, and where they will call out where the Blight Guard fragment is. It'll be above one of the remaining plates. So let's, for example, start off with L1 plate. They will call out R2 plate. And so L1 person stands on the plate, remains there, and the R2 person stands on theirs and remains there, and the Torn will be able to see these hidden platforms that only they can use, and they'll go up and retrieve the actual fragment. So once this fragment has been collected, again, you don't need to really do anything. It is automatically provided to you as long as you pass through it. So when it gets to the third torn person, they will collect the final fragment, and again, like I said earlier on, they'll use the ability to remove and steal the aura from the daughter that is shooting. We'll just sort of cover a quick example here. So L1 plate person has been randomly torn, so the roamer on that side will replace them. Roamer stands on the L1 plate, which reveals that the next plate is the R2 plate, which the R2 person will step on, and that allows the torn person to traverse the path and retrieve the fragment. You'll do that for 3 times, and the person with the aura now has a large orb sphere attached to them. So it'll just track them wherever you go. It will track them, and that will that acts as an immunity field, and also where you will be doing damage. So all teammates should enter this orb, inform damage on the now vulnerable daughter. Where you want to do damage is really up to you, but I think a lot of teams, especially mine, have been doing, there's these sort of mid platforms just halfway down from where the daughters are standing. You basically go to the opposite one and you look up, and that's pretty much where you can do damage. You can do this really fast. You can have essentially like a minute worth of damage time from either the Dirge of Unraveling or the Hymn of Weaving. Again, that is your sort of debuff for this encounter. Once it gets to 0 is where the other sister will perform a wipe. And if you're not within that immunity field, you will die. So if you manage to kill a daughter fast enough, where you're waiting around for 20 seconds, that's fine, but keep within that immunity field by the time the timer hits 0. And you're pretty much repeating for the second daughter. And it's a pretty simple one here. Due to some various... I think how the daughters are coded, that yes, they are bosses, but they're currently taking elite level multipliers. So you can use Wardcliff Coil if you want, and it shreds these these bosses. It's quite funny to see 6 players with 6 Wardcliff Coils, and just seeing that health bar melt. It's a lot of fun. Alternatively, you can go for Gallahorn, and everyone else can use rocket launchers. It can be a little bit of a squabble, especially up on that mid platform shooting up to the daughter. But it is perfectly reasonable to use rocket launchers. Alternatively, again, we've been recommending linear fusion rifles here. They are the sort of go-to when it comes to damage. For that. For hunter-specific builds, again, it's Golden Gun or Blade Barrage or Gathering Storm. But, I mean, to be honest, you're going to be doing a significant amount of damage if you're using, rocket launchers or LFRs or Gallahorn Wardcliff Coils. So you might not pop off your super in time by the time the health bar hits that 0 mark, but... it's a fun encounter here. What do you guys think? What are you guys going to be recommending for Titan and Warlock?
Yeah, what's this you got?
Yeah, you're not taking a whole lot of damage when you're up there dealing damage to the daughters, so you don't have to. You're not compelled to run a well, but you're more than welcome to. I'm sure. Again, with Lunafactions, you can definitely speed up the reload, but that would be very helpful. But again, any Titan with Rally Barricade would have the same effect because you're all going to be right next to each other. So there's really not a whole lot there. You can kind of just spec into add clear supers for when you're out of the damage phases, just clearing stuff quickly. That would definitely be an option there, but. The choice is you. Again, just talk to your fire team, figure out what works best. There's not a whole lot of pressure from the mechanics and the setup of this encounter for a specific super or specific set of abilities. It's mostly going to be weapon damage that you want to lock down. So figure out what you're most comfortable with, what you can hit that target with easily, and then just make sure you're following through the rule book here for how to get through all different plate mechanics and calling out when to step on and step off, getting through that stuff quickly. That's your priority. And then weapon damage, of course, when you get to the daughters. Saint, what about you?
Yeah, I am honestly usually just running like an arc class here or something like that, because there is a lot of arc taking phalanx shields that spawn around, and it just doesn't, to your point, like I don't need to be dealing damage with my super or like throwing down a bubble or anything like that. It's really not necessary. I will say I do have a fun fact that I found out through some trial and error this past week of raiding. If you take the aura away from the daughter that is singing instead of the daughter that is shooting, then you can immediately go back to your places as soon as she's dead, and it will circumvent the wipe mechanic. And for whatever reason, it considers that as like that daughter is ending the song that would have triggered the wipe, which is funny because I have always targeted the shooting daughter over the singing daughter, but it turns out you can like save yourself from having to wait out the timer if you kill the one that's singing instead of the one that's shooting. Yeah, I don't know. That's not really. It's going to save you a total of like 4 seconds. But hey, there's something for you.
I mean, I think we'll probably touch on it once we get to the comparison between D1 Kingsfall and this one, but I've never really quite understood why we go for the one that's shooting, but yeah, I'm aware of that as well, where if you attack the one that's not shooting, the one that's doing the actual wipe, then yeah, you do get that kind of quick, fast-pacedness, and I'm not sure if the one that's doing the song has more damage, but I've not noticed because they've got very small health pools. Or I should say my weapons are doing increased multiplier damage.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's about it for daughters, right? So next up is Oryx, and this is hugely going to build on the mechanics from daughters and just add on a couple extra pieces there. So I'll start off with saying that the plates kind of mechanic where you have 2 players standing on 2 separate plates to gather the fragment, that piece is like exactly the same. What you're going to be doing with that is a little bit different, and there's also a few extra enemies added in and stuff like that. So hitting up the specific enemies first, we have those elite Hive Revenant Knights that spawned up on your plates. There'll actually just be a knight on your plate every time when you start the encounter. There will be a knight on everyone's plate, and then if you hit the bombardment kind of interlude phase after your DPS phase, there will also be 1 knight on the top of each plate. I'll talk more about that in just a second. You have the Vessel of Oryx. This is the enemy that is going to give you that aura of immortality this time, instead of coming from one of the daughters up on the platform. When you are nearing your 3rd fragment piece pickup, you will see that this big knight spawns in and kind of just runs into the middle of the arena with a big aura around him. Just like the daughter, you use your interact key on him after you use interact to pick up the 3rd piece, and that will like take the aura, and then you can kill this Vessel of Oryx. There's also 2 more enemies that have to do with the kind of the damaging and the actual damage phase of Oryx himself and the stun of Oryx. That is the Light Eater Ogre boss level enemy and the Light Eater Knight boss level enemy. These spawn on each plate, so each plate will get 1 of these, and we'll talk more about the rotation that they come in, but on your mind should basically be each time if you're on a plate, you have 1 ogre to kill near you and 1 knight to kill that will try to eat the blight that the ogre spawns, which we'll explain in just a second. As for the keywords, yeah, we have that same blight object, you have the same torn, we have the same aura of immortality, and then the new interaction is the bombs, and this is what those ogres drop. So when you start this encounter and you go through and you kill your knights off the plates and somebody's getting torn, these ogres will start to spawn in. They're taken ogres, they kind of crawl up out of the ground in a corner near each person's plate, and they have a pretty decent amount of health. If you are using something like Izanag's Burden or Wither Horde, feel free to just hit them up with a shot of that. That will be good. If I'm usually playing on Stasis, I like to throw a Glacier Grenade at them and just get some damage on them. This is also an enemy that you should be team shotting with your teammates. So if you are just standing on a plate waiting for somebody to jump around and trigger the mechanic, help your teammates shoot their ogres as well. And then also, while you are killing these ogres, after each ogre dies, kind of in order, they spawn around the room in a circle, more or less. Each blight will get a Blight Eater Knight. It's basically going to spawn a kind of across diagonally from where your blight is. So if I am on R2 and I kill my R2 ogre, my knight that I'm responsible for that is going to try to take my blight from me is going to spawn over by L2, kind of in that corner, and then he will make a beeline diagonally for my bomb. The reason that he's so concerned about the bomb and I'm so concerned about the bomb is because this is what allows us to actually trigger the damage phase against Oryx, and it determines the length of the damage phase. So if the knight succeeds in his mission, he will come over to your area and he will eat the blight. So you can no longer use it. Ideally, you will kill him before that happens as he's on his way over, because you need to use these for the damage phase. And kind of how that plays out is, after, we've gone through this whole thing, we've grabbed our the pieces of our aura, and we get the final one, and we dunk on that knight that came through the middle, the Vessel of Oryx. You then are going to see Oryx slam his fist down, and he will call out in the feed that he is, channeling the darkness or something like this. And this is your cue that it is time for DPS phase to start. What you're going to do next is then stand inside the aura of these taken blight things. And they look kind of, like a blight that you would see, and you're like Lake of Shadow Strike or whatever it may be. And as soon as you step inside the aura of this, you are basically going to start a timer which detonates that blight. You'll see your name pop up in the feed to the bottom left, and that's how you know you're detonated your blight, and then everybody heads to the middle. The reason it's important that you do this in sync and you detonate 4 of them, as many as you can, is because of 2 reasons. Number 1, the number of bombs determines the length of your damage phase. So 4 bombs is the longest possible per normal phase. If you have 2 or 3, because some got eaten by knights, it will just shorten that down a little bit. And then also, if this corrupted light bomb goes off while somebody is outside the aura in the middle, you're going to die. So it is what is going to stop Oryx from doing his wipe mechanic, but it will also kill you if you're outside of the bubble. So to kind of recap our flow here, we're coming into the encounter, we're having players move around and float as they are torn between dimensions and make callouts for the platforms that they need to go to. We have the ogres that are getting killed off of their spawns. We have the knights that we need to kill that are trying to eat our blights. And then once we have grabbed our piece and gotten the aura, you step inside your blights, you detonate, and then you all head to mid inside the aura and just shoot Oryx right in the chest. He has an absolutely massive crit spot, even if you don't have a divinity or anything like that. Very easy to hit him right in the chest. It's a pretty long damage phase. All the weapons that we've been talking about for precision bosses and stuff like that are going to continue to work very well here. Ideally, you're going to do this twice, and then he's going to go to Final Stand. But before we go to Final Stand, I'm going to talk about what's going to happen after you do a damage phase. This is what I would call the interlude. Basically, there is option 1, which is bombs, or there's option 2, which I would call the Thunderdome. This is kind of like a little, you just got out of damage phase, and Oryx has like a little extra bonus mechanic for you to make it through. If it's the bombs phase, you'll see Oryx kind of stick his hand up in the air, and these like taken blight bomb kind of little detonators will start popping up all around you and need to run around the arena. This phase will eventually just time out. You can also end it early if you kill all of the knights that spawn on the platforms. Just be careful, don't get caught looking, as I would say, and trying to shoot your knight and just get exploded by a bomb, because that, then it's just a wash. The other thing that he may do, the Thunderdome, is where he creates this bubble kind of up towards his spawn point, and these taken thrall will spawn outside of it and try to go inside of it, and then players will get pulled into the bubble one by one. When you're inside the bubble, you're fighting a shade of Oryx, which is kind of like this low health copy taken version of Oryx. Is the best way I can describe that. Team shot him, use your snipers or whatever. Don't be afraid to use a super if you're not using well or whatever to take this guy out. As soon as he's dead, we'll go back into the normal realm, and then it just starts back over, just like it would if you did the whole bomb phase and then you made it out of that. You've got him down to his final stand phase at this point. What's going to happen is he's going to move back to the front of the arena, or, back of the arena. I don't know what to say. He's going to move to the second, the number 2 side of the arena. Okay, furthest away from you when you spawn in. I really, I don't know how else to say that. At this point, there are going to be 2 more Light Eater Ogres that spawn on the left and right near him, and you're going to want to kill these guys, and you can stagger their detonation or detonate them both at the same time. It doesn't really matter, given the normal mode, how much damage you're probably going to be able to deal to them. You should be fine. This is the same kind of a thing where it will say in the feed, Oryx is channeling the darkness or calls upon the darkness. You detonate these bombs, everybody goes into the aura in mid, and then you shoot him in the chest for final stand, and then he dies, he floats off in his crystallized form into eternity, and it is incredibly satisfying, and you don't get Touch of Malice for the 10th week in a row, because that's just, that's how RNG goes. Court, anything to add or just hunter tips here?
Again, Gathering Storm is your go-to if you're comboing with a linear fusion rifle. And again, I'm going to recommend surprisingly Golden Gun with Starter Scales. Blade Barrage, it's not going to work here, Chief. Been a few a few runs where I've noticed those that are using Blade Barrage, they're peppering the rest of his body and not the crit zone with Blade Barrage, just because of the distance here. So it's not ideal. You're pretty much wasting your entire super. So Golden Gun, Gathering Storm, they're sort of go-to power builds here. And I mean, that's pretty much it. I'm not really sure if Tether even works on orcs. I'm not entirely sure if I've not went and tested it myself, but I keep hearing people saying that it doesn't necessarily work. I know Sunder and Glare doesn't work on orcs either. So yeah, I'll need to double check on those for perhaps a future episode to break down. But yeah, Gathering Storm, Golden Gun, Starter Scales is your hunter look. Impetus, what were you thinking for Warlock?
Well, Radiance again, not very flashy, but boys that appreciate it.
You don't say.
Yeah. Divinity here will be certainly very appreciated. Again, it is a big crit spot that you're all shooting at, and it's going to be very hard to see where the div bubble is. But when you do happen to connect with the bubble, it's greatly appreciated. So feel free to run that if you want. Otherwise, I definitely think that you should be going all out on the damage. Lunafaction Boots is going to be kind of my number one recommendation here. That's going to be just so helpful. You're at a really... I mean, if you want to hit off some fusion grenade trick shots, you do you, boo. But I think the most consistent, the simplest approach is probably just to stand there with a linear fusion rifle. I've just been doing Arbalist and then my linear fusion rifle of choice, because I can double up on my scav mods, my ammo finder mods, my reserves, my holsters. Just makes it real easy for me, even though my heavy linear fusion rifle typically has auto-loading holster on it. So yeah, very simple, straightforward. You can definitely... I'm trying to think here. None of the other supers, even the damage supers. The only other one I would really consider to be Chaos Reach, but it does not deal anywhere near enough damage to be actually contributing to the total, which is unfortunate. But well is perfectly fine. So that's what I'll recommend. Stay on solar. Use the fusion grenades for ad clear if you want, with the touch of flame aspect. That's going to be extremely helpful. If you want to really lean into support, you're absolutely welcome to run Aeons and spawn a bunch of heavy ammo for your fire team. There's so many different enemies that you can proc that off of, and you do need to kill them anyways to save yourself from the wipe mechanic. So go to town, have fun, yeah. That's my recommendation for Warlocks.
I mean, you guys already know what's going on with the Titans. If I'm not playing on Stasis, because that's just not available to me at the time, or the team composition just isn't quite there, I'm probably going to play Arc so that I can just be tossing Storm Nades like all the time at these Ogres and these Knights. It really just helps the team overall kind of keep that encounter in check. Also, really appreciate my my team's Div Specialist is really good about using their heavy ammo on the Ogres as we go through the encounter, which honestly is super nice. If you are using Divinity, don't hesitate to use your whatever, your linear fusion rifle, rocket launcher, machine gun, whatever you got on to kill those Ogres and Knights, because that will just help your overall team, especially when somebody is torn on a plate and somebody's having to go over there and help them cover. It is always nice to be able to expend that ammo. I mean, honestly, overall, if you are headed into King's Fall for a reprise, it's really probably not going to take you that long. I would say an hour to an hour and a half is like a quick run. If you're trying to learn everything for the first time, it's probably going to take you 2 hours, just because there's a lot of various things to go through. But we hope this guide was helpful and will just kind of help you shape your builds as you decide to take on all these encounters on your own with your own squad. So next step, we are going to be getting into the weapons And man, boy, we got some juicers. Court, what can you tell us?
How about these weapons, man?
Yeah, what's going on with Runneth over?
Well, I'm just making a quick note here for a timestamp, just so people can skip our raid guide if they've already been through it. So just 1 hour 49, I'll put it here. Yes, so weapons breakdown, King's Fall, and it's very interesting origin trait. Runneth over. Now the text reads here, reloading near allies overflows the magazine. So this will probably be the same kind of metric as Ensemble, that kind of distance. It's around about 15 meters of any allies overflows your magazine. So 10% for every ally, and that goes up to 50% if you've got a squad of 6, so including yourself. The ammo always rounds up. So, for example, if you've got a base magazine of 9 and 50% of that goes to 13.5 or 14 rounded up. This works everywhere. It's not just the raid. It can work in Crucible, it can work in Gambit and Strikes. Anywhere you're going to be using this. It's very interesting perks and perk combinations that we'll get into very shortly here as well. It does get enhanced by the Bottomless Bounty 1 artifact mod for Season 18. That is overflows twice as much, so it now goes from 10% up to 20%, and the max is 100%. So again, using that same 9 magazine example, instead of 14, it goes up to 18. So it's very interesting. We're getting to the realm of, these small magazines getting SMG levels of magazines. So it's a fun little origin trait here. Some great combinations, which we'll get onto. I'll talk about a few as well. Just a quick note that all the Kingsfall weapons can be crafted after receiving 5 recipes. That's your 5 red box extractions. All of the Kingsfall weapons also have adept versions. They are named Harrowed. Again, they're just available from the master version. They don't have any they don't have access to enhanced traits. They don't have access to any sort of additional things. You're going to be running the master mode for Harrowed versions just for that adept style bump. It's not. It's maybe not the best. I think we'll obviously have our own thoughts about this later on when we talk about Kingsfall at large. And just as before we start things off with some of the weapons here, the Kingsfall weapons don't actually have an exclusive raid only perk like previous raids. So like Vault of Glass had rewind rounds. Bait and Switch is an exclusive perk to Vow of the Disciple. So here we don't have any unique ones. However, they do have exclusive perk combinations, whether that's double damage combinations or perks that do not normally show up in another column. So, for example, Vorpal in the 3rd column. I know there's a few weapons here that have that. A little just highlighted information there. We're going to start things off with the pulse rifle. Impetus, what can you tell us about that?
Yes, so we have a kinetic adaptive frame pulse rifle in the Smite of Moraine. That is a 3-burst, 390 RPM pulse rifle. Interestingly enough, there's only one other 390 kinetic pulse rifle. That is Hailing Confusion from Europa. And you can probably see where this is going. There's not going to be much of a statistical competition here. So Smite of Moraine has 43 range. That is higher than Hailing Confusion. Hailing Confusion, though, does have 52 stability. That is higher than Moraine's 50 stability, although not by much. Moraine also has 47 handling, that is higher than Hailing Confusion, and it does also have 47 reload speed, that is higher than Hailing Confusion. So not much of a competition here. Hailing Confusion does beat it out in stability, but has a pretty lackluster perk pool, and Smite of Moraine does not have a lackluster perk pool. This is probably one of the most versatile perk pools I've ever seen for a PvE gun. I can't wait to break down the columns 3 and 4, but we will start off with columns 1 and 2. That is our barrels and mags. At base, we are sitting at 70 recoil direction. So if you are somebody who needs it to be just a little bit higher, Arrowhead Break is a perfectly acceptable one that'll take you all the way to 100. If you don't need to go all that way up, we do have Chambered Compensator, Extended Barrel for just that plus 10. And then if you feel like it could go a little bit higher, you're welcome to put on Counterbalance stock. So there are some options there. Just play around with it, figure out what works well for you. If 70 recoil direction is fine for you, I'd probably push you towards, any stat that you want to get a little bit higher, because you've got so many different options here. If you want to get a little bit more range, a little bit more stability, small bore corkscrew could be fine here. If you want to get the handling and the stability higher, flute is going to be perfect answer. Again, the base stats here are just perfect, so you can really kind of pick the one that you want and focus on it and shoot it up with your barrel, and you'll be in a good spot here. When we move over to magazines, we're sitting at a base magazine of 38. That is actually higher than Hailing Confusions, which I believe has 36. So you get an extra 2 bullets. I'm always going to go for Tactical Mag. I like more bullets. I like the stat bump there. That's perfectly fine. Flared Magwell, of course, could do wonders for you, getting that reload speed up even higher if you wanted. Extended Mag, gonna hurt your reload speed, but you're sitting at 47 bullets. That could be really nice. And then you've got a Pendant Mag that'll just give you up to 44. So again, a lot of options here. This is just a great weapon to really, it's a multi-tool essentially. You can configure it however you want. And when we look at column 3, oh my goodness, there are so many options here. So we have Pugilist. That's our final blows of this weapon, generate melee energy. We've got Demolitionist in column 3. Love to see those two there. We've got Focused Fury. This is our one that's not normally in column 3, and it's making the jump over. So we have a damage perk, a precision damage perk showing up here. And then finally, stats for all the tried and true. Moving over to column 4, it just gets even better. We've got Swashbuckler to pair with Pugilist. We've got Adrenaline Junkie to pair with Demolitionist. We do have Firefly, which was originally that Vault of Glass exclusive. That is showing up on these weapons as well. And then we've got Vorpal Weapon. I'm not a big fan of that on primary weapons, but it is here for you. And finally, One for All. So just to keep things simple here, let's talk about all the different builds that you could spec into if you so desired. If you are going for a mid-range weapon that can play into a melee build, Pugilist Swashbuckler, going to be great for you. If you're going into a grenade build, Demolitionist Adrenaline Junkie. If you want to tap into, say, precision hits build, Focused Fury and Firefly is going to be absolutely extreme. Firefly, remember, does also give you a little bit of a help with your reload speed. That is a plus 50 reload for 6 seconds after that precision kill, plus the, of course, explosion. So very helpful there. Feel free to run a double damage perk there. That's why I paired it with Focused Fury. Get even more damage, even more explosions, and you've also got that reload perk. That's going to be phenomenal. And then, of course, the perk combo that is widely beloved on this show, Stats for All and One for All, is going to be fantastic here. So even though this is a kinetic weapon, it's not going to do fantastic in content where you've got shields. It still is designed for so many different situations. So really, any of those perk combos, if you want to mix and match, do something even crazier, go for it. It is truly probably one of the most expansive perk pools we've ever seen. Definitely craft it. Even if you're not interested in crafting, the chances that you're going to get a usable perk combo on this gun are going to be so high. So feel free to play around with stuff as it's dropping for you as you're doing the raid, and let me know what perk combo stands out to you as I pass you off to Saint to talk about my new favorite gun.
It makes a good case for it too, Iftis. I can't say that I blame you, honestly. We are talking about the Doom of Chelchis, also referred to as the Doom of Chelsea, if you are struggling with that sometimes. It is a Void precision frame scout rifle. It's 180 RPM, and that frame bonus is a more vertical, predictable recoil pattern. When we look at the competitors, it has one, which is the Royal Chase from Season of the Hunt, and the Royal Chase just cannot compete with this thing, honestly. It's just not even close. Even stat-wise, Doom has 49 range, Royal Chase is 38. Doom has 40 stability, Royal Chase is 38. It has 39 handling, which is honestly one of the weak points I'll be talking about in just a second, which is 2 points under Royal Chase, which is the only one where it lacked there, and then 76 recoil direction versus a 63 from Doom. Honestly, Doom of Chelchis just has better stats. It has better perks. It's just a better gun. It ain't even close. When we look at our base picks here for barrels and mags, I am really probably going to go for that arrowhead break, partially for the recoil direction, but also partially for what it is giving me to handling. I really appreciate that extra 24 points to recoil direction as somebody who plays a decent amount of time on controller. If I'm playing on M&K, I'm probably going fluted. That's going to be 15 handling and 5 to stability, which would just really help bring up that base 39 to a 54, which is really nice. And the next tac mag is, it's just harder to deny. Some people, I think, would like flared magwell to bump up that lower reload speed, but I am just not super concerned about that because I'd rather focus on just a little bit to kind of all the stats there with tac mag and how that works. And now getting into the good part here, this weapon can do what only one other weapon in the game can in the third slot, and that is roll with explosive payload, which is one of my all-time faves, which immediately ratchets this thing up into a top pick. Also in the third column, some decent options of adapted munitions, stats for all, Firefly, and Vorpal, which, again, some of those are rare picks for any weapon in the third column, and it only gets better from there. In the fourth column, we have Repulsor Brace, One for All, Frenzy, Focus Fury, and Dragonfly. So if you like damage perks, man, boy, this is the gun for you. There's just, again, like the Pulse Rifle, there's just so many ways this could go. To just round out the build, I would say I'm probably master working on handling or reload, and my build that I'm honing in on, the one that I'm going to be crafting, is the role that is one of my absolute all-time faves on that Fatebringer, which is explosive payload and frenzy. This is just a workhorse weapon in any given activity. If you would like to go for even higher damage potential, again, frenzy is going to be 15%. Explosive payload is usually about 11 to 15 or 16%, depending on where and how you're hitting a target. So you're just getting a kind of static 26% buff when both of those are up, which is very strong. If you want to go for something that is even stronger, we have One for All and Explosive Payload, which isn't going to give you some of the other handling and reload buffs like the Frenzy would. That, to remind people, that is 50 points to both of those stats whenever Frenzy is up, which personally, given that this weapon is a pretty low handling, Frenzy basically means that I can get my reload and handling to about 50 and then have them maxed when Frenzy is up, which I really appreciate the feel for that, but can't deny the 46% damage buff potential that Explosive Payload One for All can put out there. If you want to double down on a Void build, you could use Explosive Payload and Repulsor Brace. Ugh, that was a mouthful there. Your volatile rounds, getting a debuff target there, right? And then you're exploding them. You're dealing more damage. Explosive Payload. Repulsor Brace is giving you that overshield. Pretty nice in-game. That one really is only going to work well when you have those void volatile rounds and you're built into that. But again, very, very strong option there. And then finally, the last build I could mention is Room Go Boom, Firefly, and Dragonfly. It's just a ridiculous combo. I got this to drop on one of my random rolls on week 2, and it's comical, but also it can be effective. It does a lot of damage, man. You put on a Firefly and Dragonfly spec, and you've got those all going off on the same explosion from some acolyte. That's a big area of effect damage, so not an in-game viable, but you really should test that out if you get your hands on a roll like that. So another incredibly versatile, incredibly good weapon with a lot of fun rolls there. Quartz, what's going on with this hand cannon over here?
Yeah, I'll just quickly point out that, of course, we'll be seeing Dragonfly spec rolled into Dragonfly very shortly at some point. So yeah, Doom is definitely the bringer of Doom. Lots of fun combinations there. I think all three of us are very excited to get some of those crafted. Another one that I think we're all excited to get crafted is Zeoli's Bane. That is the Solar Adaptive Frame hand cannon. That's a 140. Obviously, there's no stat boosts here. It's just a standard hand cannon. We are going to be comparing it with Annual Skate, which is from, sometimes see it in the Gunsmith. We haven't yet seen it at Zur, but presumably that will drop at some point, sometime in the future. But again, it's a pretty rare drop if you really want to line up all the good perks that come with Annual Skate. And also we've got Ancient Gospel, which is from the Garden of Salvation raid. So just comparing with two here. The Bane does have 43 range, which is the highest of the three. 52 stability, again, it's the highest. 46 handling, its joint second. Skate does have that +1 more. 43 reload, it's joint first with Gospel. 77 aim assistance, again, it's highest of the three. 14 zoom, it's the same as the other two. And 89 recoil, second. But Ancient Gospel has that delicious base 100. Straight from the get-go. So if you really value your recoil direction, then dig out some of your Ancient Gospels. Overall, the Bane does have some good competitors, but honestly, it's pretty far out ahead compared to Annual and Ancient. However, you do want to compare it with Palindrome, which isn't really fair. It's a void hand cannon here. It will beat it out in every stat except reload, where it's just a -1 behind the Bane. So Palindrome isn't really available now. It's not available to be acquired. So, if you want a sort of go-to adaptive frame weapon, the Bane is the one you want to go for, because Annual Skate's a rare drop, and Ancient Gospel does have a small perk pool. It doesn't have an origin trait, nor can it be crafted. We'll see whenever Garden of Salvation weapons do get a refresh and an origin trait sometime in the future, but this is your go-to now for one specific reason, which I'll get into a little bit. Highlighted some barrels and magazines here. I think you've got your standard small bore, fluted, and corkscrew. I think small bore is your sort of go-to here for that +7 stability and range. For the magazine, Saint mentioned flared magwell as well if you want that faster reload and stability. Otherwise, synergize up with the origin trait and put a pended or extended mag on. This will of course increase the returns you'll get when you're pairing with the origin trait, because the magazine does lift up the base mag size. For the sort of highlighted main perks here, for column 3, you can go Pugilist, you can go Ensemble. Ensemble does loop in with the origin trait, but I think we're all going to go for explosive payload here. We do have, for the damage perks, the traditional damage perks column, we've got Surrounded, Firefly, Incandescent, One for All, Focus Fury, and Demolitionist. Some really solid choices here. If you value Focus Fury, you can go for that. One for All is here. It doesn't have the Stats for All combo, unfortunately, but I mean, come on. Incandescent's there. It's the solar elemental perk. For the masterwork, really a free choice. Reload may be the most ideal, just to give it a slight edge, but I mean, anything will really do here. It's up to you. And for the weapon mod, it's just minor or major spec. But you can, of course, go for backup mag, which, again, it does increase your gains when you're using it with Runneth over. We've got 3 builds here that I'm going to recommend. I'll start off with the second build. It's the Solar Fatebringer, and that is Explosive Payload and Firefly. So you've got Fatebringer, but it's solar. The true Solar Firefly build, not this weird kinetic having Firefly. What's that all about? For the build 3, we've got the sort of meme build if you're pairing it with 5 friends, Extended Mag, Ensemble, and either a choice of One for All or Incandescent with backup mag. And you're going to have, I haven't looked at the numbers specifically in game, but we're looking at almost, SMG and auto rifle levels of magazine size here. It's pretty ridiculous. But I think all 3 of us are going to recommend here. It's the legendary Sunshot roll. And I know these guys have been teasing me because I am a big fan of Sunshot. But yes, it's explosive payload and incandescent, and pair with your solar class for the best synergy. Otherwise, it works well on any class. So really fun weapon here, and really paints a picture of, I hope Sunshot gets a little bit of a assistance when it comes to solar class synergy. But this will do. This will do for me. Exciting weapon. What do we have next, Saint?
Next up, we have the Defiance of Yasmin. This is a kinetic adaptive frame 90 RPM sniper, and it has a decent chunk of competitors. It has Tranquility, Eye of Soul, Shepherd's Watch, and Long Shadow are all in the same slot here. And when we look at its stats, it has 54 range, which is the highest in that group. The 46 stability, second highest to Eye of Soul with a few points more. 46 handling, second highest to Eye of Soul that has 1 point more. 68 aim assist, tied for highest, retaining its Defiance of Aim Assist nickname from back in Destiny 1. And it also has 40 zoom, which is the lowest by 5 points. Now, I say lowest by 5 points, but the fact that the zoom is the lowest of every adaptive frame kinetic sniper rifle is by no means a bad thing. This impacts some of the ways that the range of the weapon works and aim assist and things like that, extended ranges. You can go listen to Drewski go on about this on firing range if you really want to get into that. But it is very notable that this has the lowest range of any kinetic option, especially when it comes to the Crucible and kind of the implications that that has there. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about how many bullets you can get in this thing. On the barrels and mags, I'm probably going arrowhead or fluted. Again, a nice bump to my handling is at base 46. It's just pretty low. And then I am probably going to be looking to really pump up my magazine size with extended mag. And we'll talk more about that as that kind of leans into the build in just a second. But tac mag is also an option if you just want the slightly faster reload, but definitely looking at extended mag because of its increase in the magazine size and also the fact that its negative 20 to reload speed can be negated by some other parts of this weapon's perks. On the main traits here for columns 3 and 4, in column 3 we have Osmosis and then Lead from Gold and Ensemble. Osmosis is just an interesting one always when it comes up on a weapon like this, just because of the way that it allows you to dip this weapon into other builds that it would not have previously been able to engage in. Just, throwing out there off the top of my mind, I've been ranting about how strong this Stasis build is with Reuse Regret. Now imagine that if I throw my grenade in damage phase and all of a sudden I have a sniper that can deal with the same damage buffs, which is huge. So not a traditional one there, but for sure an interesting one. And then in column 4, we've got Firing Line and Vorpal, depending on the situation that you're going to be using this thing in. Both very strong. Firing Line, obviously giving that 25% increase to critical hits when you are next to 2 or more enemies. I believe within about 12 meters, 15 meters. Very good perk there for boss damage, especially when we consider how we're going to be using this weapon. Masterwork, I'm probably going Stability because I can get more stat bonuses from other perks elsewhere. And then on my weapon mod, just boss spec, taking spec, major spec, what have you. The keystone build here is going to be Ensemble with Firing Line, with a extended mag, and with a backup mag mod on this. You can pair this with Bottomless Bounty, that perk, that seasonal mod the Court mentioned way back at the beginning of our series here. Obviously, you can get that insanely large magazine size. When you have Ensemble up on this, you are getting your handling up to 86 and reload up to 92. And just because of the way that Firing Line works, I feel like Ensemble is just a very easy, logical choice there. And if you lean into this whole backup mag, extended mag, Bottomless Bounty 1, I think you can get 14 rounds in this sniper or something like that, which again is just ridiculous. So really strong, just boss damage outputting weapon there. On the other side, the champion killer would be Lead from Gold and Vorpal. Lead from Gold is such a strong perk in the GM meta because of how just because of Aeons and how Aeons affects that sandbox and how consistent those those heavy bricks are going to be. It allows me to be super liberal with my sniper ammo, especially considering I can be dealing a pretty good amount of damage with this from afar in a kinetic slot, and then swapping to other weapons, have a primary that still matches the element and that type of a thing. That lead from gold vorpal roll could also be really nice. I know some people are super clingy to snapshot sights that appears in that third column, but I usually prefer ensemble, and especially something that I'm going to be using with firing line. But yeah, really, really solid sniper. Really fun to put a massive amount of bullets in the mag and just go to town on a boss. And I absolutely, Impetus mentioned this before, but it's really giving ISOL a run for its money as far as kinetic snipers go in the Crucible. So I suspect to see this thing bubbling up a lot more over the season as more and more people can craft it and get into that. Next up, we got a spicy fusion rifle.
We do indeed. It's Midas Reckoning. It's the ARC high impact frame fusion rifle. That is a 960 charge time, so very slow. The frame bonus here is it's slow firing and high damage. This weapon is more accurate when stationary and aiming down sights. We only have two where we're going to be comparing it with, two of which, one of which is pretty old. Again, probably only ever see it in the gunsmith or Zur if he's selling it, and it's Exile's Curse. And we have the Wizened Rebuke, which is currently in the Iron Banner loot pool, but again, Iron Banner's only around twice a season. So if you're really wanting a high impact frame here, this is pretty much your only a choice. The only other one which you could go for is Iota Draconis, and the other one beyond that, again, is related to a seasonal event, and that's Glacial Chasm. So you don't have a lot of choices for high impacts, but I think this one's definitely the best because of the build, which I'll be going into very shortly. But let's compare it with Exile's Curse and Wizened Rebuke. It's got the highest amount of range here, 53. Lowest stability at 22, lowest handling at 19, lowest reload at 18, highest aim assistance at 68, same zoom at 15, and 78 recoil direction, which is second. It's just one below Exile's Curse. So again, Exile's Curse is not acquirable, and Wizened Rebuke is only available twice a season. So while it kind of lacks in stats, it's your next best choice here if you want a kind of high impact fusion rifle, especially when you pair it with a ARC subclass, which again I'll talk about very shortly. Highlighting some barrels, and well, it's not magazines here, it's batteries for fusion rifles. For the barrels, we've got Chambered Compensator, which is that plus 10 stability and recoil, just to bump up to ensure your bolts are coming out nice and stable. You can go small bore for that plus 7 stability and range, just for a mix of stability and higher range. But I think Chambered Compensator is your best bet here. For battery, there's a lot going on here. I've wrote quite a bit technical stuff, which I think I'm going to need to go look at in further detail for maybe a future episode, but it really depends on how all these magazines works with Reservoir Burst and Runneth Over. I'll just sort of pick out here. It's not easy to kind of to look at how mag sizes work on Light.gg and D2 Gunsmith, because they're never accurate. The magazine sizes aren't strictly what shows on those websites. They're not the same as what's shown in game. So there are some theoreticals here that I'll talk about. I'm going to mention, again, this is theorized. I don't have an actual roll of this. I do have with enhanced battery, but for ionized or enhanced with reservoir burst, your base magazine will be 7. If you pair it with Runneth Over, for one ally up to 5 allies, it follows this trend. So 8, 9, 10, 10, and 11. For most builds, you're only really going to be using this in like a 3-man activity, so you're going to get that 10 magazine when you pair it with your fire team with Runneth Over. There is again, theoretically, there is a much larger size here that you can get, and that is backup mag with ionized with reservoir burst. Backup mag does add to your magazine level, as does reservoir burst. So again, theoretically, the base size here would be 9, and if you're pairing it with the origin trait, it goes from one ally up to 5, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So if you've got 5 allies with this roll, you could have 14 shots with this fusion rifle. I'll talk about how this kind of relates to Reservoir Burst and functionality here in just a little while, but I'm going to highlight some main perks. For column 3, we've got Cornered. That's pretty kind of standard fusion rifle, especially for high impact. It just really lowers your or it speeds up your charge time. I think it's 100 milliseconds faster. There's no damage reduction here, unlike the Masterwork version, which does reduce your impact. It's 50 meters within 2 enemies of where you'll get the cornered benefit here. Field prep is here as well. It will bump up your total reserves here. And if you're crouching, you'll get that 45 reload with a 20% multiplier scaler, and also a 20% ready/stow animation duration, which is sort of pseudo handling stat here. So you can go for field prep if you really want to, just to bump up the low reloads. Again, it's 18 reload to start off. Backup plan, I've never been a big kind of strong believer, because it's very, you swap to your fusion rifle when it's up for, it's 4 seconds or so for high impacts, and it's a 30% faster charge rate, but you do get that 20% decreased damage. So it's a little bit of a net loss here. You can go for it if you really want to, but for the builds I'm going to be talking about, it's not ideal. For the next one, we've got Unrelenting. And now this is a bit of a perk that kind of goes under the radar. It got buffed, it was about a year and a half ago, where it's a little bit more forgiving, and it rewards you for being more aggressive, and it's going to be quite important for this particular role. For the damage perks, we've got Golden Tricorn, which does make its appearance. Arc is pretty easy to proc your various ability effects to get that to go from 15% up to 50%, 50%. Vorpal Weapon is here. Again, that's 15%. And we have Reservoir Burst, which I've been talking about. That is a 25% damage buff when your battery is full. You might be connecting some dots here, why I'm recommending Reservoir Burst and why I talked about the various magazine stats. And as Saint alluded to, why this is maybe quite a crispy fusion rifle for various effects. Quickly run over some masterwork and mod preferences here. Stability or range will be your go-to here. Don't pick charge time, because it does reduce your damage, it reduces the impact, and we don't want to do that for this particular weapon here. For mod, it's major spec, but I've been recommending backup mag for that large magazine bump, just to affect the Reservoir Burst and Runneth over interaction. So this is where we get to the meaty bit. I'm going to list off 2 builds here, which you could go for if you don't want to go for the sort of crispy build that I'm going to talk about. The first is Cornered and Golden Tricorn. That's your standard go-to. 50% on an Arc subclass is, again, very easy to activate. And Cornered's a really good perk just to kind of up the speed at your charge rate for high impacts. The next build is a bit of a meme build, and it taps into what I'm going to talk about. Again, theoretically, if this all works out, it's ionized, backup mag, field prep, and reservoir burst to maximize the reservoir burst gains. Though, strictly speaking, this build's not really realistic, because you need 6 players in an activity. So maybe in, Catch Crash or Raids, this may be fun to use, but you might draw the ire of your fire team members. Like, why are you using this? But for the less meme build here, I'm going to go for. Again, it really depends on how the magazines work here, but accelerated coils will be your sort of go-to, plus Unrelenting, plus Reservoir Burst. Unrelenting with Reservoir Burst is a good combo if you can keep setting off those multi-kills or or kill higher targets. And just a reminder how Unrelenting works. It works off a counter scale here. So upon reaching 3 points with weapon kills, it starts your health regeneration and it heals for 80. It's around about 80 hit points. So rank and file, that's your minor enemies, grants 1 point on defeats. We're not talking about guardians here, but guardians are 2. And everything else, elites, mini-bosses, and bosses give 3 points. So if you kill, we were talking about the Revenant elite knights in the raid earlier on in the episode. If you kill that with this weapon, you will start your health regeneration because they give you 3 points. So it instantly activates the trigger for Unrelenting. The weapon kills must be within 5 seconds of each, so you've got a little bit of a time between each weapon kill. However, if you're using it with Reservoir Burst, that will affect the trigger here. You're going to proc this all the time. So you've got a little kind of health plus damage build here. So Reservoir Burst, what's the whole gimmick here? Why are we recommending Reservoir Burst with Runneth over? It's because Reservoir Burst continues to activate until you hit the base magazine, the base full magazine number. So for example, if your base magazine is 7 and you overflow to 10, then you'll have 4 shots of Reservoir Burst. That's 25% shots. And Reservoir Burst does that area of effect thing as well. Again, it's not realistic in some scenarios. It's a free damage perk in Master content and Grandmaster content, but it does have potential if you can set it up. The reason why I'm saying, if it's 7, as I talked about earlier on, if you've got 3 allies, theoretically you could get up to 9. So that's 3 shots of Reservoir Burst. Finally, you can pair that with your Arc subclass builds, for example, Spark of Beacons, to maximize the blinding effect. And it is actually part of one of my Arc builds, which I guess we'll talk about our sort of refreshed builds in a much future episode. But this is part of a sort of recommendation if you don't have access to various, forbearance with chain reaction, or if you don't have access to Salvager Salvo, even though it's readily accessible to buy from the kiosk, you can opt for this if you like your fusion rifles. So I know there's a lot of kind of explanation here. I do want to revisit this at some time in the future once I get a lot more rolls related to the magazine levels, but it's quite an interesting perk, interesting combination with Reservoir Burst, and don't forget Unrelenting. It's a sleeper hit. All right. Let's round things off with a machine gun. Impetus, what can you tell us?
Yeah, this one's not a sleeper hit. I had to break to you guys. Quillam's Terminus is a stasis high-impact frame machine gun. The frame bonus here, slow firing and high damage. This weapon is more accurate when stationary and aiming down sights. Not that that's going to matter much. Let's look at our stats here. So as is the case with a lot of stasis weapons, there isn't a lot of competition in slot. There are other stasis machine guns, but they are not high impact frame. This is the only high impact stasis type, but we do have a number of high impact frame machine guns to compare this to. All right, stat time. Range is going to be 68. That is the second highest, although the Swarm has 69. Stability is 20. That is the second lowest. Archon's Thunder has 17. Handling is 30, and that is lowest in slot to all high impacts. And then reload speed is 36. Second highest, Swarm has 38. So definitely not the best pick on stats alone compared to other high impacts. Again, being stasis, we do have access to some stasis perks, so that can separate it. But again, there are other stasis machine guns. I'll get into that in just a moment. Let's talk about barrels and mags here. For me, the biggest offending stat that I want to correct is going to be stability. So polygonal rifling is going to be a huge one there. Fluted barrel, if you also want a little bit help to the handling, those are going to be my 2 big picks right there. I think those are the worst offenders. On the mag side of things, tactical mag is there. That's going to be very helpful. Get an even bigger buff to handling and stability and reload speed this time around. Flared mag all would be my second pick there for an even bigger buff. Appended bag is fine, but again, I really do think that this gun needs all the stat bumps it can get. We do have a perk in column 3 that can help us get better stats, but for making this a viable competitive weapon, I definitely do think we should give ourselves as many benefits as possible on the masterwork side. Definitely stability, definitely. All right, let's get into columns 3 and 4 here. Unfortunately, there's not a lot to talk about. There are strong perks, but there's not a lot of synergies, which is kind of the unfortunate aspect here. So the big ones in column 3 that stand out, we do have Unrelenting again in column 3. That's nice to see. We've got Heating Up. That can certainly help with getting us some stability. And then we have Stats for All. Stats for All is going to be my number one pick here. That is going to be great for giving little boosts to a bunch of different stats. I think it's a phenomenal perk. So that'll be my recommendation for column 3. Column 4, we've got some interesting options here. Firefly shows up for the first time on a stasis weapon. That should be very interesting. Headstone, of course, that is an option. Focus Fury, probably, depending on how good your aim is, you could maybe make this work. I'm not too thrilled about it. Firing Line, of course, is something that we use for bosses and mini bosses. I am not using a machine gun for that purpose, especially not one that's in the heavy slot compared to LFRs that also frequently roll Firing Line. So please, please, please do not put Firing Line on a machine gun. I don't know why Bungie keeps doing it, but you can do better. And then our final pick here is Killing Tally. That has showed up on last season's Fixed Odds. Very, very strong machine gun perk. It did, of course, debut originally on a very strong machine gun, so that's going to be great. My build recommendation, again, Stats for All for me is the only one that really stands out for a strong gun that can excel at ad clear. And then Firefly or Killing Tally are going to be my picks there. I do want to talk about our stasis machine gun options. In terms of Headstone, that is a good option here if you want it. Headstone also appears on Recurrent Impact. That is the rapid fire frame machine gun that showed up in Season of the Risen back at the start of this year. That rolls Headstone. Some people have trouble controlling rapid fire frames. I totally get that. I put Headstone on my crafted roll of Recurrent Impact. I just tap fire it, finds it a lot to be a lot more manageable. Recurrent Impact also has a way better perk pool. There's so much better stuff. You can do Subsistence Frenzy. You can do Stats for All, One for All. You can do Field Prep Headstone. Great options there. And then last season, to make things even worse, our ritual weapon was the Stasis Machine Gun, Chain of Command. That rolls with Adrenaline Junkie and Osmosis in Column 3, and then Demolitionist and Adapted Munitions. So you could use that for all types of shields and still proc into, Font of Might for your stasis builds. So it's a pretty competitive field for Quillums. I wouldn't say that this is a necessary weapon to get, and it's definitely going to be the last one that I focus on getting the red borders. I don't even think I'm going to craft one, though, to be perfectly honest, because I just enjoy Recurrent Impact and Chain of Command better. So, bit of a Debbie Downer here. Hopefully this doesn't take away from how amazing the primary weapons in Kingsfall are, and certainly the special weapons have a lot of very interesting roles. So it's a shame that Quillums couldn't quite show up and bring the same amount of excitement as the others, but it certainly doesn't take away from this perk pool as a whole. Anyways, that is the end of our weapon breakdown. That is the end of our event breakdown, or our counter breakdown, excuse me. We're going to spend just a little bit here talking about reactions and feelings. I'll start things off. Fellas, how are we feeling about this raid, this reprised D1 raid compared to our other reprised D1 raid in Vault of Glass? I think I know your answers already, but Saint, what are your thoughts on Vault of Glass versus Kingsfall?
Let me start out with this statement. VOG is limited by the fact that it had to introduce people to raiding. Mm-hmm. And base VOG is so simple, and it needed a lot, honestly, to come into Destiny 2 and for it to be, any kind of a challenge for players these days. And I think that is probably why, where my criticisms between Vault of Glass and Kingsfall would come in. I think that the changes that they did make to Vault of Glass were cool. The communication for oracles is interesting. The sequence of the calling out is interesting. But the Templar was the same. The Gatekeepers was a good change, and then Atheon was a good change. But I felt whereas in Kingsfall, Golgoroth got much better of a change than the Templar did, So I think that overall now in Destiny 2, Kingsfall is, I would say, the better raid. Like they did what they could for Vaulted Glass, but it just starts from such a basic point that, King's Fall is probably just better. Court, what are the feelings there?
Absolutely, I can only echo what you just said there. I am not a fan of Vault of Glass. Yes, it's a more refined experience on Destiny 2. It's just one of those raids that, again, what you were just saying there, it's strung by its foundation. Like it can't necessarily be any tougher. I want it to be tougher. I want it to have more pizzazz. But I think that's what did get pizzazz was King's Fall in comparison to Vault of Glass. I don't think any of us will argue here and say like, okay, it's great to have Vault of Glass in Destiny 2 as welcome to Destiny 2. Let's get you set up on a raid experience. And I'd be like, okay, let's do Volk. It should be it shouldn't be the go-to, but it is the go-to for sort of new player experience. King's Fall is a little bit more advanced. Normal version, we've all ran through it multiple times now, but it's got a little bit more of it's still grounded by Destiny 1's raid style and how they built raids back in Destiny 1. It's got a sort of glow up compared to Vogue when it entered D2. Impetus, you got anything on that point?
Nothing new to add. I'm in agreement with you guys. It doesn't feel like a fair comparison, really. But progress is good. I mean, it's great to see where we started with and where we're at now.
I think there's a big concern that this raid would follow the sort of Vogue refit where, they've enhanced and refined a lot of things, but it would still be the same, where you'd just be standing on a bunch of plates and exploding bombs and not actually doing damage to Oryx, which is one of my biggest fears as well. I was really wondering how they'd approach Oryx, the actual encounter, because in Destiny 1, we didn't shoot Oryx. We let the bombs pile up, and you'd use that to enter final stage, or final stand, and then actually do damage. So, speaking of D1's King's Fall, obviously Saint and I have done both versions, the launch and the Age of Triumph version. What do we think of its transition from Destiny 1 to Destiny 2 and its quality of life and improvements? Saint?
I think it's funny that you just said that, Core, because that was where my mind was at as well, with like the War Priest of like just stand there and shoot. And then they went and made this War Priest challenge where you have to move the entire fire team around the arena, essentially. Yeah, so they were like, oh, you don't want to stand still, huh? Okay. All right, we can see about that. And like the way that they changed Golgoroth to make you use, basically you have to use all the orbs if you don't one phase it, or like if you want to one phase it, you also need to use all 6 orbs. I think that was a good change. And then Oryx being able to take damage. This is like one of those things where at first I was like, that's a bummer because that was something that was unique. But then I realized that if you're strictly dealing damage via mechanic, there's no way to master that. And that part of that does not feel good because if Oryx's health is completely dependent on detonating these stolen light bombs, then there's never a Oryx one phase. There's never any opportunity for your team to like improve week over week, which like I think is something that brings people back, especially the first. It's at least the first 10 times that you do a raid, you're kind of learning, taking on new bits of the experience and trying out different roles and things like that and feeling like you're kind of mastering this experience. And if my boss kills never get any quicker whatsoever, and I've been playing this raid for 6 months, that doesn't feel great.
Yeah, I mean, for me, King's Fall in Destiny 1 was overall my favorite raids. But what let King's Fall down in Destiny 1, which has been vastly improved in Destiny 2, where War Priest, which was a pushover, like you could just like do primary damage on him and he'd fall over, which is kind of funny how it's now the big DPS check now. An Oryx fight, again, for the reasons you just said, where you weren't really doing anything. You were standing on a plate. You were either standing on a plate or standing in a bomb, or then just standing in the immunity sphere. So those two things did let Kingsfall down, and I'll happily admit that. But the overall experience, the vibe of when someone says D2 raid, the first thing that pops in my head is Kingsfall. It's not Vogue, it's not Crota's End, and it's not Wrath of the Machine. I will say that Wrath of the Machine's boss fight, Axis, is fantastic. And if we are getting that in D2, I cannot wait for that boss fight. Because I don't think they can refine or improve on perfection, because that is what that boss fight is. But Kingsfall, it's my top raid, and its refinements and retunements and just the feeling is still there, and it looks so good. It looks fantastic on Destiny 2's engine. It just going back to Destiny 1, which I did maybe a few months back just to have a look at it, thinking, oh, this is probably going to be a reprise raid at some point, and it's not aged well. It looks pretty rough around the edges. So seeing it in Destiny 2, it just looks so great and awesome. And seeing Oryx pop up, and you're just like, oh, this is just so good. The scaling, the environment, and the vibe just sounds, it feels so good. Impetus, we won't forget about you, of course. You didn't really get to play Kingsfall in Destiny 1, is our understanding. But playing it in Destiny 2, how does it feel versus the other Destiny 2 raids?
Yeah, I think mechanically, I would say it's probably my favorite raid. I'm generally not a fan of having to split up 6 people to go do a bunch of different tasks, but I think the fact that there's so much swapping and switching with timers and trading things out to extend the damage phases, I like that mechanic. I think that's very, very creative. I like having good communication as kind of an unofficial mechanic in a raid, and I think Kingsfall is definitely one of the more communication-heavy raids. We don't really have a whole lot of that. Like I think of our most recent one outside of Kingsfall, Vow of the Disciple. There's not a lot of necessary communication other than, say, I'm reloading div during the damage phase, or the game is telling you when to make those movements during Caretaker when your plate stops glowing, and so that's when there's time to move and stuff. And even in the more symbol heavy ones, if you have the general layout and you can see the symbol, then you know what to do, and you can kind of just type it in chat. And so you don't really need to talk. There is still some communication there, of course. But playing this, though, I really do feel like when I've gone through the entire raid, my team and I, we beat it together. Like when the communication works, when you get through that War Priest, when you're swapping the gaze on Golgoroth, when you're given a countdown to go step into your bombs to start the damage phase for Oryx, or you're calling out what that interlude attack is going to look like, whether it's Thunderdome or the Meteor attack. I feel in sync with the 5 other people that I'm playing with, and I love that feeling. That's the reason I do raids right now, and that's why, to me, Kingsfall mechanically is my favorite. It's just I feel like I'm a part of something bigger when I get done with it, when we go from encounter to encounter. And yeah, sure, I'm still gonna grief the heck out of my fire team members on the platforming and jumping puzzles, because that's just what you do. But when the pedal hits the metal and it's time to do damage, I'm in sync with everyone, and it feels great, even if we're all just standing still and mostly relying on weapons as opposed to our abilities and grenades to do a lot of damage to these bosses. So I still have great things to say about it. It's definitely a fun experience, and I'm itching to go back and just see what the original version is now. All right, last thing we'll talk about here before we wrap out the episode, our very long episode. Oh my goodness. Where does D2 Kingsfall rank against the other D2 raids, including those that are no longer playable? I definitely don't have too much experience with those no longer playable raids, so I think you two guys can probably give a little bit more insight into this. I know for me personally, it definitely ranks at the top. I've already said that. It's going to take a lot to dethrone it. How about you guys, Saint? Like, where does D2 Kingsfall rank for you?
I mean, this is like something that I have just really enjoyed. I mentioned this once on a previous episode, but I did King's Fall in Destiny 1. Never had a good raid team in Destiny 1. Never had a consistent group of buds or anything like that I was going in consistently week after week with. So having that experience in D2 has been great, and that is like, it's like not nostalgia. It's better than I remembered it being. It's a weird feeling, right? And that is really great. But whenever I'm thinking about every other raid, I think like Last Wish is kind of my like bar for raids as far as like mechanics and stuff like that goes. And I think that there honestly are some things that King's Fall does better than even Last Wish does. Like the way that they present the scale of Oryx in King's Fall is even better than Last Wish, because in Last Wish you only get like a glimpse of Riven's size for like 10 seconds, versus in King's Fall, when Oryx is in the room, it's like all attention gathering, can't take your eyes off of this massive boss that is just like wandering around in the arena. And I absolutely love that. I love the way that they present like Oryx as an enemy. And I mean, I would say I'd probably put King's Fall as my like maybe number 2 or 3 now, with Last Wish being like number 1. I do miss Scourge of the Past and Crown of Sorrow a lot. They both had, things wrong with them. You could say that Scourge was too quick or could be completed too quickly. But I just love the environment and the type of mechanics in that raid. And then also Crown of Sorrow, another one, Impetus, you just described this feeling of like coming together and like really feeling like we beat something. This is the same exact way I felt about the Galron fight, because it was this kind of a thing where you're working in 3 groups of 2 with your partner, and each group is swapping at just the right time to get ready for the DPS phases. And that was another one that really gave me that feeling of like my team mastered this and like we came out on top. So I would put King's Fall as like a comfortable number 2 in Destiny 2, which is like pretty, it's pretty big statement right there.
Wow, high praise from our resident raider here. Number 2.
Yeah,
well.
Maybe I'll change over time, but I'm enamored.
Yeah, once you've done the master one. Like I've got a little soft spot for Crown of Sorrow. It was like a storm in a teacup there. It felt just a lot of fun. It was short. Yeah, it was, part of that. Well, I don't think they called it a raid layer at that point, but it was a small raid, but it just felt really fun to do. I do have a soft spot as well for Leviathan, the original D2 raid, just because it was different. It was very like juxtaposed, just compared to coming off of Wrath of the Machine and then doing Leviathan, I think was quite startling for a lot of fire teams out there. But what they were going for with Leviathan, I was just like, yeah, I can respect this. So it's definitely not like up there in my top 2 or top 3 slot, Leviathan and Crown, but I do have soft spots for them. In terms of where this places, probably top 5. I think Vow of the Disciple for me is still my go-to like raid night. Let's do a raid. Okay, we're doing Vow, because it's. I feel like it's the next generation of raids. Deepstone Crypt had that certain element where it was this transition between old D2 raids and new D2 raids. So that's still kind of high up there. Whether it's like second or third, I'm not really sure where to place Deepstone Crypt, but Last Wish is still, up there as well. It's as Saint was saying there, it's another kind of, it's the King's Fall for this game, for Destiny 2. Just the amount of encounters there are, it's scaling, it's encounter designs, So King's Fall for me, top 5, somewhere around there. A lot of the raids kind of swap in and out, but Vow of the Disciple is still my top tier raid. I suppose we'll talk about raids and like all the raids at some point in the future, like a retrospective. Do we want to like discuss with you guys at some point? But that wraps up for our giant, huge episode here. I'm just looking at the clock here. It's coming up for 2 hours 50. Not as long as our Q&A episode. from last season, but it's getting there. Anything else you guys want to say before we wrap things up?
Right good, man. Right good.
Just like you mentioned the visuals of King's Fall and how much better it looks versus Destiny 1. That's a fact.
All right, well, another episode in bag. This has been episode 32. We hope you enjoyed our big Kingsfall episode. I think subsequent episode will be 30 minutes maximum. This is the exception to the rule, as we've said most of the time. But yeah, let us know on the Massive Breakdowns Discord server or our socials what you like or dislike about Kingsfall and its weapons. Thank you again for listening, especially our patrons who support the Massive Breakdowns network. We also want to thank our audio engineer, MisterSudden, who managed to get Touch of Malice on one of his first few runs, and I think we're all very jealous about. That's the sort of karma for making these giant, long episodes.
That's what we get.
I guess.
That's what we get.
Nice.
Next week we'll be back to our core roots of the game. In a few weeks we'll also be preparing for our usual assortment of Grandmasters too. My name is Court, and you can find me on Discord as Court or on Twitter as @CourtProjects. You can of course find my documentation on the Massive Breakdowns website, along with our future builds and other documentation and applications to enhance your Destiny experience. Impetus, where can we find you?
My name is Impetus. You can find me by that name on Discord and Destiny, and as Impetus always on Twitter and Twitch. Saint Kabir, where can we find you?
Yep, you can find me at Saint_Kabir on Discord, Twitter, Twitch, hanging out in the game, and over the Massive Breakdown server, posting some builds this week, like they mentioned. Thanks everybody for listening to another massive episode. We'll see you next week.